In any event, it's 6 o'clock and we do have a quorum present. We do. And so, Mary, could you take attendance, please?
I will call the roll, and I'm going to go alphabetically in reverse. Mr. Howell.
Present.
And myself, Mary Hartman, present. Ms. Escobedo.
Present.
Mr. Dane.
Present.
Ms. Ackerman.
Present. Trying to keep us awake, huh?
Yeah, just...
Changing it up.
Yeah.
So the first order of business is public comment. What? Sorry? Yes. Oh, I'm just...
She has
We're
public
not ready.
comment.
Well, just hang on a minute. We haven't started public comment yet. Just try to control your enthusiasm.
Or nerves.
Or nerves.
I know that's hard. We have set aside, as always, 15 minutes for public comment. I assume that, oh, sorry. My sign has to be straight, too. I know that some of you are here for various reasons, but I understand that, and you understand public comment is for the purpose of talking about things that are not on the agenda for tonight. Because when we get to things that are on the agenda, if there is any decision to be made by the board, we will ask for public comment on those specific items. But I do know that there are a few people here who wanted to talk about the Warner's Pond charge, and so I would like to give those people a chance. Why don't we take 5 minutes for that, for those people who want to talk about that, and leave the rest of the public comment period open for people who want to comment on other things. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's start with getting the Warner's Pond public comments.
I don't know if your mic is working.
Huh?
I don't know if your microphone is working.
Well, could you hear me talking?
I can hear you talking, but yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Jimmy Two Feathers, 303 Commonwealth Ave. I'm here to talk about a little bit about Warner's Pond, and the thing that has me very agitated right now, I will admit. I'm an indigenous person. I'm Wampanoag. My people are from Mashpee, but we share allegiances with the Nipmuc. So I saw the commission, the makeup for the advisory committee for Warner's Pond, and in that it had, number one, no abutters. I'm an abutter to the pond. And then it had this thing about a Nipmuc, Native American person, being on this commission, and that's what got me upset. Because, okay, I've lived here for 40 years. I live on the pond. I'm as indigenous as you can get as far as Warner's Pond goes. Why are we going to have somebody else from another tribe, and I have nothing against the Nipmuc, but the optics look terrible.
Well, can I say this, although we typically do not respond, but the final decision about what the charge is going to say has not been decided by the NRC at this point, and I know that some of the issues that you've addressed have already been addressed on that. So I would suggest that you communicate with the Natural Resources Commission. There is a League of Women Voters session on this on Friday morning at the library. It's also online, so that there's an opportunity for all of you who have something to say about that issue to actually have some influence on what happens. And so, but thank you for your concern, and I understand that all the indigenous people may not be on the same teepee.
Just the other pieces, I am on the, full disclosure, I'm on the DEI Commission. I'm bringing it up to the DEI Commission as a complaint, and I will recuse myself from any decisions made on that commission because it wouldn't be appropriate for me.
Good, thank you. Is there anything else that anybody here has to say within the remaining 3 minutes on this subject that is not covered by the the discussion that's already been
Yes, good
taken
evening.
place.
Yeah, Vicki Alani from Commonwealth Avenue. I have two issues related to Warner's Pond. One is and I know we've been communicating with the NRC, but one question we have and a concern is that now that we've all agreed that the issue is bigger than ecological, it has historical, recreation, all kinds of other really important components to the decision that's going to be made, that it doesn't make sense to us that it's under only the NRC, since the NRC's charter and responsibility to the town is ecological. And so why would the group that is only focused on ecological issues be put in charge of something that is so much broader? So we're looking to see if it's possible to have somebody who has broad responsibility to the town, like the Planning Commission or one of the advisory committees. So putting that out there as a concern that
Again-
somebody, it's like putting the Historical Commission in charge of it, or
Again,
putting the Recreation Commission in charge
I
of
think
it.
that when you see the draft charge that comes out of the NRC, I think
Yes.
you will see that a number of those issues have been addressed. But please feel free to bring those items to the NRC.
Yes.
The fact is that the charge of the NRC gives them the authority to appoint their own subcommittees.
We understand
and so,
that.
And I think they've been extremely responsive.
And they have, yep.
And so let's see what comes out, and then we can see whether it's
It's just funny to
Makes
us
sense.
that we're asking them to do something so much broader than what they are experts at. So that's one, and we believe me, we've been putting, we've been communicating with the NRC, we've been putting in our comments on the charters.
and it's had effect.
Yeah, yes, and thank you for that. And then the second one is really that other task forces in the town of Concord, the voting members are all residents of the town, and currently, even with the updated draft, we've seen the updated draft of the task force makeup, even with the updated draft, there are non-resident voting members of that task force. This would be the only task force in town that allows outside organizations to vote on the future decisions of items in our town. So we love that there's a task force with advisory positions, but the advisory positions should be the non-voting positions.
Okay.
So put
Thank
that
you.
out
Actually,
too.
committees in town do have non-residents.
As voting members?
They do.
Oh, interesting. Is it task forces?
Well, task forces are usually
Yeah,
short-lived
yeah.
committees, but they're very similar. The main difference between a committee is a standing committee, and a
Right.
task force has a limited, but we do have non-residents on town committees.
And
Yeah, we haven't seen them on any of the task
And
forces. so-
APP 10 does allow for it when there is reasonable justification for it.
Right.
So,
And we just see
anyway.
some
Yeah.
conflict of interest with some of the groups that are voting members on that task force. They've already come in with a final decision and have been pushing a
Right.
certain
That's-
agenda,
okay.
and they are voting members, so.
Oh,
putting
okay,
that-
thank you.
Yes.
Is there, okay, so I think we've taken is there anything new that needs to be said about this in the remaining minute and a half that we've allotted for this?
Yes, Miguel Echevarri, 255 Commonwealth Avenue. So basically, the dredging of the RFP, it was mismanaged, okay? And let me just explain that.
But this is, well, let's not get it, we're
No,
not
but
getting.
actually, it does,
No.
because you're asking us, if you look at it, right, the NRC had 5 years to develop a plan to design and to do a solution on this, okay? Now, the thing is, though, is after 5 years, the solution was primarily based on transporting sediment. Follow me on that.
Right.
The main component of that was to dispose it at the prison, okay? The prison had severe restrictions.
But we're not going to get into the merits
Okay,
of
you
this.
may not,
This
but-
is something we understand that there are some issues about how it's been
Except for
handled in
the
the past.
issues are, as a matter of trust in the NRC as a rezoning of
But
this.
this is something that you can take up with the NRC.
But the
initially.
NRC, at this point, looks like they either grossly mismanaged the RFP and then misled the public, including this board and the committee members of the NRC, okay, of the National Resources Commission, all
Okay.
right?
Now, all right, you have expressed these views in a number of letters, which I have passed on to the NRC, and they are taking this information into account. Again, as I urged you, there is being a League of Women Voters is having a hearing on this on on this on Friday morning at the library. It will be virtual as well as in person, and you will have a chance to express your concerns. But this is a point. This is not. This is not an issue over which.
So I'll make one last point and then I'm gone.
Is
So
it
as
short?
you know, on the Jewel Park, okay, the Attorney General is investigating the town of Concord. They're also investigating the town of Concord over Warner's Pond because of the bad business
Okay.
practices
Well, we
used.
will. If we get, I hope that when we get investigated, they will find that we are a wonderful town.
We used to be a wonderful town.
Okay.
Just
Sec-
one further thing. The NRC is scheduled to meet on Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. And the further discussion of the draft task force charge will take place then. You're encouraged to continue to write your comments, and that's going to be the next formal discussion, and that precedes the league meeting that Henry was just mentioning. So Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. I know that conflicts with, somewhat overlaps with the other forum on Hanscom
Yep.
jets, but it's 7 p.m. at 141 Kais Road, and that's also available on Zoom for anybody who wants to.
Well, those conflicts limit the number of different issues about which people can be unhappy.
One would hope.
And that's why they only have 7 days in the week.
Anyway, that's 7 p.m. Wednesday evening,
Okay. Now, are there any public?
141 Kais Road.
Are there? And by the way, the reason, aside from the fact that this is an issue that is not under the jurisdiction of the select board, aside from that, we really have nothing to talk about until we know what the Natural Resources Commission finally decides to offer as their charge. So I think let's be done with Warner's Pond for now and see, are there any other issues that people would like to make public comments on? Please identify yourself and maybe even let us know what the subject matter is.
Yes, it's about arts. It's about the cultural committees, the Concord Center, the task force that was just established, and I'm Tanya Bartevyan, 62 Prescott
Could you
Road.
put the microphone closer to your mouth?
Tanya Bartevyan, 62 Prescott Road. This is a sort of follow-up to some of the comments I made during your last meeting about individual independent artists being in partnership with arts organizations and having their due place in committees as well as in policy making and in the arts activities in town. So there was explanation last time that the new task force was kind of considered as a replacement or extension for the Concord Center Cultural District Committee that hadn't been meeting for a while. So I looked up their charge, and that was made of, initially that was intended to be made up of 7 members, 4 of them community members at large, and the other 3 representatives of the arts, not per se necessarily representatives of organizations. I suspect that after a while it did become into a 5-person group of mostly organization representatives. In fact, I noticed that in 2019 the committee was added to the list of committees which had special municipal employees, which essentially means people who have an interest in the subject matter that's being discussed as well. So I also noticed that we received recently a $15,000 grant for both the West Concord Cultural District as well as the Concord Center Cultural District. So I'm assuming that the new task force that you formed will be dealing with how to administer the grant as well as setting up policy for the future. And I want to again highlight that while these are all experienced people in arts and arts administration, not necessarily artists themselves, they do not represent all the artistic potentials or possibilities in town, and that including individual independent artists or even members of the public in making decisions about the broader art scene in town would be beneficial for everyone, including for economic vitality, because certain groups of people come and attend large-scale art events organized by, such as festivals, etc., organized by organizations, and other times individual artists have their own crowds and followers who come to events and also patronize different businesses and come back to Concord to visit them. So I would like, my hope would be you would reconsider the membership of this task force to include members of the public or independent artists as well. But my larger hope is to bring to your and town's attention that there are more artists out there that are represented by the activities of our organizations, which are of course also important and very valuable. So you can consider the individual artist a little bit like a small business compared to a large business.
Well, it turns out that on the agenda for tonight, there are several appointments to the, you were talking about the Cultural Council, right? No?
I'm talking about the newly formed task force, and that was discussed last time. And by the way, the Cultural Council, I've been, a recipient of grants from them, and thank you. But unlike it was mentioned at the last meeting, they do not only give grants to independent artists, they also give grants to the organizations. So I think it is good to have fair representation for all sorts of artistic activities and in all the committees that deal with mass cultural grants.
Do we know who the liaison for that council is? It's you? Why don't you, when you have the opportunity to talk to Mary about it, and maybe you can have some influence over the outcome. Thank you. All right. So that takes up our period of time for public comment, and we're going to move on to the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda with the exception of the meeting minutes for November 20th, 2023.
Second.
Mr. Howell.
Aye.
Myself, Mary Hartman, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
It's unanimous, good. Committee appointments, should I keep going?
Yes, please.
Are
Committee
you not approving the minutes, the
Should we-
executive session
Well,
minutes?
Yeah,
I said with the exception of the meeting minutes for November, oh, yes.
To not
You're
vote.
right.
What, you did that?
But I didn't specify that we are doing the executive session.
so now we
There-
should move to approve the executive session minutes
Very
of
good.
November
Okay.
20th,
Okay.
not to be released.
Second.
So, wait a minute.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
Myself, Mary Hartman, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, they were nice minutes. Okay, so then we have committee we've approved committee nominations under the consent agenda. Now we have committee appointments.
Committee appointments, Anthony Ansaldi, Chief Financial Officer to the Retirement Board for an indefinite term. Corrective appointment of Dr. Anna Feldwig of 343 Commonwealth Avenue to the West Concord Advisory Committee to complete an unexpired term to expire on May 31st, 2025. Kate James of 45 Estabrook Road to the Concord Center Cultural District Task Force for a term to expire December 31, 2024, or at the completion of the work of the task force. Jerry Wedge of 109 Heathsbridge Road to the Concord Center Cultural District Task Force for a term to expire December 31, 2024, or at the completion of the work of the task force. Carol Wayland of 6 Abbott Lane, Apartment 6, to the Concord Center Cultural District Task Force for a term to expire December 31, 2024, or at the completion of the work of the task force. Ross Jacobson of 16 Belknap Court to the Economic Vitality Committee for an extended term to correctly stagger terms to expire May 31st, 2027. And finally, Tim Hult of 20 South Meadow Ridge to the Concord Middle School Building Committee for a term to expire at the completion of the project.
Second.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
And myself, Mary Hartman, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Very good.
Okay, so we're done with that. Thank you. Town Manager's Report.
Thank you and good evening. I'd like to introduce our new Assistant Town Manager, Jessica Porter, who is actually sitting behind me this evening. Jessica will be overseeing several of the human service-related departments, including recreation, senior services, veteran services, risk management, and community services, and she will also be working very closely with our interim human resources director. Jessica brings 15 years of municipal experience in human resources and administration. In her prior position, she's worked for the towns of Andover, Belmont, and Bedford. I also wanted to note we have some new personnel in the police department. David Braga was sworn in as a police officer. I believe that was just last week. We have a police officer candidate, James Miller, who began at the Boylston Police Academy. He will be in training for 24 weeks before he returns to us and starts his in-service training with the department here. We are still interviewing for potential police officer candidates. On Saturday, November 18th, CCHS hosted our own senior citizens at the annual Thanksgiving luncheon. There were over 100 residents who attended that event. The Concord Visitor Center for the month of December will be operating Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to noon. This is a new staffing pattern for them in addition to their weekend hours. The bike share program wrapped up its 2023 season on November 27th, and we will have a ridership report available shortly. Beth Williams, our tourism director, and Mimi Graney, our economic vitality manager, are in the process of submitting a grant to Mass DOT for a micro-transit program that could launch in the fall of 2024 and be added to needed infrastructure for Concord 250. Microtransit is an all-electric fleet of vehicles that can run both on demand and a fixed route. It does not replace the need for a regional transit system, but again, we expect to be submitting a grant, and we'll be looking for letters of support, including one from the Select Board, and we believe that will be scheduled for your next meeting on December 18th. The Recreation Department has opened the winter programming registration season, and they are in the final stages of interviewing for a new rec supervisor and a new general manager at the Beatty Center. Public Works finished the Commonwealth Ave improvements. I believe that was just last week. They've done some street paving recently, working or completing Old Pickard Road, Old Marlborough Road, Butternut Circle, Mallard Drive, Black Duck Road, Fox Lane, Minot Road, Bradford Street, and Winthrop Street. The Giroux Recreation area is moving along. We're continuing work on the roof pavilion, and we do expect the roof pavilion to be done by the end of this month. The final paving of parking, driveway, and certain walkways has been completed last week. There was mention under public comment that the Attorney General is investigating Giroux Park. I do not believe that to be true. We have had some requests for some information from the Attorney General's office several months ago that has been reviewed, and there were no findings. So I'm not aware that there's anything new on that, and I'm discouraged to hear that. In our engineering division, we welcome a new public works engineer, Nexwan Norales. He comes to us from Mass DOT. He has significant experience in roadway design, drainage design, and construction inspections. The annual dog licensing program for 2024 is open. We have the Water Resources Forum tomorrow evening. We're hoping for great attendance. This will be at Harvey Wheeler. It is from 7 to 9, both in person and a virtual attendance option. And I wanted to close with a note that our own Shannon McAndrew completed the California International Marathon with a time of 3:02:23, 6:58 pace. She is not happy with her time, but we think she's a rock star, and I'm hoping when she is listening to this meeting and transcribing the minutes, she will be happy to know that we think she's a rock star.
Very good.
Thank you.
Is that something we're going to require for town staff in the future, that they complete a marathon in under 3 hours?
They run around a lot.
We have 6 or 7 staff in the town manager's office now, and 3 of them have run marathons. So,
Wow. Good thing it's not a requirement for being on the select board. Get it?
Thank you. Anything else? Any questions on the town manager's report?
Thank you, Carrie, for the update, especially on Giroux. It's really good to see progress there.
And they're nice pictures coming through, aren't they?
They are. It looks good.
yeah.
And it looks like it's like the structure of the what they call pavilion
Yeah.
is like the old-fashioned peg and beam barn type of
Yeah.
rustic structure.
Yeah, it's a very nice design. A long time in coming, but a very nice design.
Right. And I'm happy to see that microtransit grant. I'm hoping we can get that. It's great. And is the 250th committee aware? Are they involved in that?
Well, I know Beth Williams participates with them on a regular
Yeah,
basis, so.
Great.
I'm not sure how.
Send a letter of support too. Great, wonderful.
Yeah.
So we had a very productive town meeting preview meeting on Saturday morning, and got a lot of issues out on the table. What I want to mention is that our next meeting of this board on December 18th will be our last chance to decide on articles that we as a board wish to sponsor on the annual town meeting warrant, since that will be our last meeting before the warrant closes. So what I'd like to make sure is that anybody on the board, or anybody on the board in particular who wants to have an warrant article for the board to sponsor on the town meeting warrant, let me know early next week so we can get it on the agenda, so that people have plenty of time to think about what they want to do about each one of those items. There are some things that you may want to see on the town meeting warrant, but they might more appropriately belong to some other board or committee. So that's something else we'll need to decide. We are getting really, really close on the Concord Center cell tower. It is, I think at this point, it's fair to say it's a stroke of the pen away. But keep your fingers crossed. This is, yes. So, I think that's about all I have to say as for my report. What? Oh, yes, thank you for reminding me. We did get an email today from our council in connection with the Hanscom Freedom of Information Act request that we served on Massport, and the result has not been rewarding. They have failed to respond either with production of the requested materials or to file the necessary objections within the specified time. And so our counsel on that matter is using the term stonewalling with regard to the response, which is a legal term. And is recommending that we file an appeal either with the Secretary of State or with the Superior Court, and that is something we are going to have to discuss. That's hot off the press as of this afternoon, and we're told that if we need to file an appeal, it needs to be done within 90 days of the original application, not of the lack of decision. So somebody's got to do some calendar counting and see when it is we need to bring this up. If it can be done in public session, we can put that on the agenda for the 18th. And I suspect that is something that we can discuss in public. We already have.
This is the work we had Gregor McGregor do for us?
Yes. And
I would hope to get it on the next agenda.
All right, well, let's put it on and, okay. So, and we probably should bring our sleeping bags for that meeting. Because that may be a marathon. And that would mean we'd have to get it done within 3 hours.
A slow marathon.
All right, so, our next liaison reports. Okay, do we have any liaison reports? You do?
Yes, we do.
Mary, shoot.
I'll go first. I've got quite a few because we haven't done this in a while. The first is CMLB, the board voted rates at their last meeting. There'll be a very, very small increase in residential rates. They talked quite a while about using the provision for a rate refund to reduce residential rates, and they decided against that because next year they'll be moving to, two things will be happening next year. They'll be implementing time of use rates, and also the debt from the solar on the CMS is going to be hitting ratepayers. So those two things might need some offsets, so they decided to keep this in reserve for next year. So rates for calendar year 24, because they go on calendar year, not fiscal year, will be pretty level to what we saw this current year.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
So the debt from the solar,
Yep.
I'm assuming that, I understand we have to pay the debt, but I'm thinking there's an offset somewhere, right?
Ratepayers pay that.
Yeah, but aren't rates going down a little bit because of the solar with no?
No, not for a while.
Not for a while. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't do solar to save money, not yet.
Yeah, I think when they presented it, if I remember, Mark, you probably paid better attention. It looked like we had a bump in debt service for that, and then I don't know when it went negative, when it would actually.
Yeah, I think it was 4 or 5 years in. I think there's 10-year financing, so you have to pay
Okay.
for the solar. We're
10.
buying the solar array outright, is really what it comes down to.
Okay, so
there's
it's
a
an
payback
investment,
period.
and the payback will come later.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
But
Okay.
Very
but
good,
the
yes.
interest on the
Okay,
bonds
that's good.
starts
For 10 years.
right away.
Right,
Right.
got it.
Okay, I'll continue, I'll go fast. Some of us went to the Novo hearing, the 40B development that's happening off of Baker Ave. The developer presented both their sustainability and their architectural plan, and the next meeting will be focused on traffic, which I think is really the thing that is most interesting to the neighbors and the town. So it's not their next meeting. Their next meeting is to kind of catch up on all the other applications they've had, and I believe the next meeting for Novo hearing will be in January
I think it's the 11th.
of January.
Yes.
You're talking about the zoning board of appeals, if
Yes.
someone wants to look it up.
What?
If someone wants to look it up.
Well, they're having
It's the
two
zoning
meetings.
board of
The
appeals.
I
next-
think one is the 17th, one the 11th, or something like that.
Yeah, then they're having one on the 14th, but again, that's not going to
14th.
be looking at Novo. That's going to be all the backlog of other applications that they haven't done because they've been focusing on Novo. And the next meeting, if somebody wanted to look that up, that would be great. Okay.
So clarification, the 11th is the traffic discussion, or the 17th, or the?
Okay.
Well. Look,
We don't know the exact date.
Gotcha.
We do know the 14th, isn't it?
so don't show up on
Don't
the
show up
14th.
unless you have an application in front of the ZBA. Okay, moving right along, FinCom. I'll be really quick. For those of you that at the preview meeting, this is going to be a repeat. They issued their guideline letter. The total guideline is 3.66%, which will result in a property tax increase of 3.65%, but that does not include the increase to property taxes from the school debt. So if we add the school debt, which we expect to be 4%, for the portion of the school that we've bonded to date, we've only bonded like maybe 60% of the school, that's going to hit us for about 4% on the median tax bill. And that's in addition to the 3.65 that we'll get if the town and the schools adopt the guideline. The planning board is finalizing the MBTA zoning maps, and they also have a few other warrant articles. One is to increase accessory dwelling units from residential areas over to, I think it's Area B. So they're expanding the reach of accessory dwelling units across town. That will be a warrant article for us to decide. And then finally, the Solar Task Force is working, and they've got two quick ideas of getting solar on municipal land. One would be at the landfill, and one would be at the high school. They're going to be bringing, we hope, a warrant article to town meeting to raise debt to fund those. I think the landfill will be pretty straightforward. The high school, we're kind of running into a little bit of problems there, but hopefully we'll be able to iron that out. We'd like to get some solar on municipal land this year if we could. After that, we'll run into a barrier with the grid. Basically, the electric grid does not have the capability, the distribution system, to accept much more solar. So that's going to be a much broader conversation to have.
Question then.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to clarify on the tax increase. So it sounds like this year,
Yep.
we're looking at a 3.65% increase for the operating budget.
Yep.
Plus 4% for the school debt.
For the school debt we've
And
issued to
that's
date.
only part of the school debt.
That's
So
right.
the following year could be another year about the same magnitude. Is that
Exactly.
right? Okay, thank you.
Yep, it's true. Okay, I'm done.
So this is Linda. May I go next?
Did I hear Linda say she wants to go next?
Yes.
Linda, go next.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. So I've attended some of the same meetings that already been talked about this time and in the last meeting as well. But I want to comment particularly the Affordable Housing Trust has met several times since we've last reported out, and they're paying particular attention to the 40B projects, as well as they have begun to make commitments for funding to go to the CHCD for their small grants program, and that would be for 2 years, as well as some increase in funding for Rizzo's part of the issue. They have also asked for applications from CHA and also some additional ones for the Assabet River Bluff. So essentially what they're doing is committing some of the money that they already have in hand and asking for applications so that will be reviewed at an upcoming meeting beginning this week, actually. Tuesday, there's a meeting tomorrow. The other thing I would comment on is, and Mark commented on this at the last meeting, that I also had a chance to attend the Historic Districts Commission meeting where Mark engaged members there. Very interesting conversation about how they wanted to proceed with the DEI and some other issues. So it'll be interesting. There's going to be a follow-up conversation, obviously, related to all of them. How that all develops, and I think we should all pay particular attention to that. And so I think those are the highlights that I'll comment on right now. Thank you.
Henry?
Are you finished, Linda? Thank you. Terry?
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, a couple weeks since we reported last. So the Transportation committee's been meeting more often, and they're working with Public Works now and the Finance Committee on plans for capital improvements for infrastructure, some of which we're going to discuss tonight. Also, the survey, they've extended the date. They want everybody to know you have until December 8th. Please fill out the transportation survey. As you know, we have a consultant, and we're spending $100,000 on a transportation strategy, so we want to get as much input as possible. The 2229 Main Street, we had a good forum, about 75 people, if you include the Zoom people. I attended some of the same meetings, like the ZBA Novo meeting. Wednesday night, again, is the Hanscom Forum. We're one of the sponsors along with the league. I think that's 6 o'clock in the library. PEG Access, we have finally started the negotiations with Comcast, and the franchise expires in April. It runs for 10 years. If we don't finish by April, there are ways to get extensions. It's a pretty routine thing that most towns have to do. Just because of scheduling, we may not finish by April. We'll see. And the DPW had a very good forum, their regular meeting on the water capital plan. Besides the stormwater meeting tomorrow night, we also were advised that the water system might need close to $100 million within the next 10 years, mostly to combat PFAS, but also other infrastructure things. So that means the water rates will be going up significantly over the next few years.
By the way, my thought when I heard that discussion, and also the discussion about the adding to the water rates, the cost of processing stormwater,
Right.
my thought was that would buy an awful lot of Poland Spring.
Which is depleting
Well-
the water table in the state of Maine.
Yeah.
But actually, the water rates are very low now, I think. So even if they're projected that, for example, they might double in 10 years. Well, like I know my house is like $40 a month. Compared to all the other things we pay, that seems like a bargain to me. Everything is more expensive than that. Cable, everything, phone, taxes, everything is more than $40 a month. Electricity, the water is like one of the best bargains around. I don't think you could buy a month's worth of Poland Spring for that price.
However, it's important to note, and I didn't know what you can do about this, but very little of the actual water that comes through our drinking water system goes into the body. It is used for bathing, flushing toilets,
Sprinkler systems, right.
And very little of it, even though the quality of that water has to meet all the criteria for the most, utmost safety, that safety is irrelevant for almost all the uses which the water is.
I think things will change in the next few decades as water gets scarce, but that's the end of my report.
This is all a good argument for coming tomorrow night and hearing all about the water system.
Yep.
Right. Mark, do you have any
Well,
liaison
I
reports?
think I'm the only one that actually reported out in the last meeting, so that's one reason why I was holding for last. We've already discussed this evening the fact that the NRC is working on the Warner's Pond Task Force charge. That meeting, again, Wednesday evening at 7 is the next opportunity for that with the NRC, looking for comments on the draft, which is available for review. Both the original and the draft are on the NRC webpage if you would like to see those documents and comment. I'll also mention, as I think I did before and we heard about on Saturday, that the personnel bylaw is being proposed to be updated by the Personnel Board. So I anticipate that article will in fact be sponsored by the Personnel Board, as they typically do bring their own articles. However, we're looking for that to be on the agenda on the 18th. And I think in addition to the bylaw, we will have an opportunity to have some discussion about what sort of charging document we might want to put in place. That current charge to the Personnel Board is something like 40 years old. I think it's 1985. And in the context of having a new bylaw, it's an opportunity for this board and that board to sort of agree about what our communications should be about. And so I would anticipate those two topics at that one. And I think I'll wrap it up at that to keep us on schedule.
Okay, thank you. All right, that takes care of liaison reports. The next item on the agenda is Paul Murphy and his proposal to place a commemorative plaque in the downstairs hall of the townhouse.
Thank you, Henry. This process started quite some time ago. I was looking to place a plaque somewhere. I had no idea where. And I went to the Gold Star Families event in September. I saw Kerry there. I didn't get a chance to meet with her because it rained, but I sent her an email. She forwarded that email to Megan. Megan reached out to me, and that got the ball rolling. Billy Crosby, who's in the back here, a design company, he made this plaque. It's made of corium. I hope you can see it. I hope I don't take too long here. Hold that, please. Okay. And these are all the soldiers from Concord who have died since 1961. And they've been different wars, okay? So in this peacetime thing, these last three, I had no idea what that meant. If someone died and we were not at war, they weren't part of this Gold Star Families event. So I researched these three people, and I found that on the Concord honor roll, two of the names were incorrect. I forwarded that information. Henry sent me a nice note thanking me, and that brought the list to 11. So I've reached out to every one of these families. I told them what I was trying to do. I found my spot over here by the town clerk's office. I was in the lobby placing this plaque there, and Anthony walked in. We had a nice conversation. And then I followed the process through. Megan was an unbelievable positive influence in this whole thing, and this brought me here. So I appreciate the efforts of the town, treating everybody so nicely along the way, and that's why I'm here.
Well, thank you. And this is under the infamous APP 43 that requires the consent of the select board for the placing of items in the townhouse. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. So, and this all came up, I think, in connection with correcting the honor roll that is read every year at Memorial Day.
Correct.
Which is a very important part of the ceremonies on Memorial Day. And this is something that we need to recognize and remember and be grateful for. So thank you, Paul. Is there any discussion on this, or is it just, do we want to just congratulate Paul for taking this job on?
Well, thank you. I sent you a Vimeo. The nice lady across the hall sent it to you. So I did. My daughter did this. I visited all the graves and have all the soldiers, and I reached out to all the families and told them. So I sent them all a copy of it yesterday. So
Okay.
that's where I am. Well, thank you for
Thank you. Is there any discussion on this? Okay, is there a motion?
There is. Move to approve the request to place a Veterans Memorial Plaque in the townhouse next to the town clerk's office.
Second.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
Myself, Mary Hartman, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on. All right, so The next item of business is the capital planning forum,
It is.
okay? And
I'm just going to make a couple of comments, and then I will turn it over to Anthony while he's getting set up.
Point of order, right, the school committee, it's a joint meeting, so they want to,
We don't have a quorum yet.
Yeah, you do.
oh, there we go,
There.
okay. Do you want to invite them to come up?
Yeah.
well, I don't know how this conversation is going to go, so let's just, if Anthony's got, if they,
You want to wait? Do we have a small, so the school committee is posted for 7, so there's a, sorry. Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay, they
Okay.
want us to take up something else, this is not till 7.
it isn't.
Yeah.
Oh, they want us, well, we could, well, there's nothing that is, nothing that, no, we don't have any 10-minute items here.
No.
No, so,
Tell jokes.
or play music, or, huh? But is there, I mean,
Well, we might, I can see if she's on there.
well, is this a formal hearing? Is that what it is?
No.
Or it's just a discussion?
It's just
It's a
a,
joint meeting.
It's a joint meeting. Well, so, hey,
It's
let's
it's a
just,
joint meeting that's posted for 7 o'clock by the school
So
school committee.
we need to wait until 7 so the school committee can start their meeting on time.
I see. Well,
well, we
You
can
know what
have
to
a
say.
7-minute break.
huh?
We'll have a 7-minute break, I guess.
Stretch break.
Okay. I guess,
Is the town doing a presentation of their capital budget, or how is this working?
yeah, why don't we just do the, there,
Are we or not? I don't know.
We are making a presentation.
well, why not, can we go with our presentation? And then it will
Are
be.
you okay with that, Carrie? Or would you rather wait?
I think it makes sense to wait.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I'll be right back.
Can we mute? In case we get round on
I
this.
can't, Mark, I can't find out when the next ZBA hearing is for,
They probably haven't posted it yet.
they said it at the meeting.
Yeah, well, it's probably in their minutes, because I know that they did mention 2 dates. So they know what they are, and it would be in the minutes, which we probably won't have until after.
Right.
But Elizabeth would know, wouldn't she?
I said that hadn't hurt. I felt it all the way over here.
Doing other tasks that I normally do. And we have growth, I just have opportunities, right? So let's talk about both. But it's different.
ZBA is listed on their pages, December 14th and January 11th.
January 11th, you had it. So December 14th is everybody else's applications. It's January, where's Diane? Diane. Diane. It's January 11th, the ZBA. So the beauty center on Saturday, first of all, the pools overflowed.
Overflowed.
And then they lost power.
Well, Saturday morning, a lot of people lost power.
I know.
And do we know what happened?
Yes, it was a squirrel. A very, very large squirrel.
That's what they always say.
I know.
They must, what? It was a squirrel? Oh, come on.
And they said no one ever believes us.
I know, and they never do. It's just like,
What do you mean people don't believe us?
I believed it. I'm very gullible. I believed it.
It's not gullible, it's just fact.
It's never the same squirrel twice either.
No.
That's
really?
true.
There's sacrificial squirrels.
Yeah, I heard.
Fortunately, they just make more. They're like Doritos.
Thank you. It's Christmas.
This was,
It's December.
That was the thing that we
He's
always
talking
considered.
about squirrels are like Doritos.
The problem is when they chew up the fiber, they get to survive and come back and chew another day.
Oh. Okay.
fried squirrel. They fry at 220 or 440? 18,000. That fries a squirrel pretty fast, doesn't it?
So that was a good way to go.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very fast. Yeah, those upper wires, that's why you don't touch them.
Well, whether
I have a
it's
question about wires. Why are there 6 sets of wires on my street? I mean, there's
I gotta say
phones
hello to Guy.
and cable,
Phone, cable, fiber,
okay?
and then sometimes there's an alarm system. But usually there's another set of wires that's just for the street lights, which are low voltage. And then at the very top of the pole, there's 3, depends on, it can be 1, 2, or 3, but the actual power.
Oh, so these are not old company phone lines or oh, wow, so that's normal to have that many
Yeah.
wires?
these are lines on the top of poles that the squirrels got
well,
to.
yeah, the squirrels get into that, or sometimes they'll get into the transformer connection that's in there.
Because it's warm.
They just chew it. If the squirrel ends up sort of between 2 of the wires, that's when they find out what they've been playing on. But they can run along on one wire all day long. They're not grounded, so nothing happens.
Wow.
When they bridge certain gaps.
Well, that was crazy the other day. They had all the lights on Rig 2 out. It was nuts.
Is that why they put all those aluminum shields on the bottoms of the light poles?
That's mostly actually to keep the pole itself from rotting or corroding. I mean, those poles are basically dipped in creosote, but they
But they are just like brown aluminum covers. For
Oh
them.
yeah, some of that, the place where the animals most likely get into it is in the transitions from underground to overhead. So the more undergrounding we do, the more places there are for them to get in there. Yeah.
All right, how many minutes do we have left? Looks like 1 or 2 minutes.
Well, why don't we have a squirrel bounty?
Like a deer hunting season?
No, a bounty. Where they for killing invasive species like woodchucks or beavers or coyotes.
So whoever gets the biggest one gets the biggest...
No, not a prize. You cut off the ear and you take it to the bounty window, and they'll pay you, $5 for each coyote ear you bring.
That's how we can raise revenue for the town. It's really creative.
Okay,
All right.
good. And get rid of squirrels at the same time.
Yeah.
And you have to bring the squirrel's tail to the town treasurer's office and you get a credit for your real estate tax.
Right. So should I bring that up during the Capitol hearing? Creative ways to get revenue, right?
Next week, we'll put it on the town meeting warrant.
Yeah.
Government decided that they had a cobra problem.
Oh, yeah.
So they started paying people for dead cobras. And you know what people started to do?
Breeding, of course.
Cobras.
That's what they do for the dog adoption centers. They actually, so the buddy, I don't know if it's Buddy Dog, but many of the other organizations that provide people with, quote, abandoned dogs, the demand is so strong that they actually have puppies bred to be adopted.
Okay, 7 o'clock.
It is 7 o'clock. And all is, and my hearing aid is turned off. All right, it is exactly 7 o'clock, and we will convene. Oh, no, we'll just
Get you a gavel.
Wow,
No,
there we go.
thank you, everyone. It is now 7 o'clock, and we will proceed with, as soon as I get my hearing aid turned on.
Henry, talk real loud in your microphone.
But, all right, so we are now ready to convene the School Board and School Committee Fiscal Year Capital Planning, Select Board School Committee Fiscal Year 2025 through 2029 Capital Planning Forum. And as the school committee opened its meeting,
We have to call order, yes. So I'd like to call the Concord Town School Committee to order.
And I'll call the Concord School Committee to order, but I think we need to roll call present, because some of us are on Zoom. So Anderson present.
so you're all set?
Morano present.
Okay.
Ready, present?
Whit present.
Carrie Patel, you also here?
Sorry, Patel present. Couldn't find my mute button.
Thank you. That's all set.
Okay. Let's
Okay,
proceed.
again, if I could just make some opening comments, and then I will turn it over to our CFO, Anthony Ansaldi. I wanted to start by mentioning that 2 years ago, we had a capital planning task force that outlined a new process for reviewing or considering capital improvement expenditures. As I know you are familiar, but maybe there are people here who are just tuning in for the first time, the task force identified capital improvement expenditures in 3 tiers, tiers 1, 2, and 3. And the process that the task force outlined and the select board accepted and adopted was relative to tier 3, very large projects, projects that would likely include or result in the need for debt excluded financing. And last year was the first year we went through the revised capital improvement planning process considering tier 3. And we had 3 separate meetings. We started with a joint meeting between the select board and the school committee, followed that up by a meeting with the finance committee, and then finally, at this time last year, a second joint meeting between the school committee and the select board to review tier 3 capital spending and the impact to the tax base. This year, there was a request to modify the process and to have some visibility in public meetings on tiers, all tiers 1, 2, and 3. And we have accommodated that in our schedules, but I would be remiss if I did not point out that we have done so at a time when both the town and the schools are light in the finance department. So there are significant openings in finance, budgeting staff on both sides. So we have done the best that we can in the timetable, but we recognize that there's still work to do, and I just wanted to point that out because we are not as far along in the process as we would like to be if we were fully staffed and had identified at the beginning of the process, our budgeting process, the timetable that we would be working under. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anthony to review the presentation.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, boards. So the first slide, next slide, Megan. First slide is a few of the components that's part of the capital expenditure policy. The first one is what the town considers to be capital items. That's okay.
Anthony, can you speak right into the microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. So the first item is what the town considers to be a capital item. Second part is that it's in compliance with GASB 34 and depreciable assets. Third part is the capital finance, how it's going to be funded for Tier 1 and Tier 2 within the levy. And the fourth aspect is that we present a 5-year capital improvement plan, which this is. Next slide. So this slide's talking about the investment policy. At 7 to 8% of the total budget, net of excluded debt is associated with 2 to 3% for Tier 1 and no more than 5% for Tier 2 debt within the levy. And then the next chart is the tiers of what's considered a Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 project. So the next slide, what we do is we send out to the departments the blank sheets and ask them to submit their capital improvement plans. So for the next 5 years, and if we look at just FY25, the total, and I say unvetted because this was the asks, this wasn't necessarily what was going to be approved. You'll see that later on in some slides, but the total ask for FY25 for both town and schools was $17,265,280. Next slide. So then what we do is the next few slides goes through what each department requested, and for the sake of just, there's about 5 slides, I'll just read the department and what the total ask was. So for the police department, the total request was $769,200. For the fire department was $537,380. Next slide. For information technology was $458,000. For planning and land management, $140,000. For general government, excuse me, $2.4 million. For public works facilities, the request was $1.9 million plus. For highway maintenance, $1,044,000. For public works engineering, $8,614,300. For parks and trees, $296,000. For the cemetery, $40,000. And then for the library was $60,000, Veterans Agent, $35,000, Council on Aging, $130,000, and the town clerk, $8,500. I know that $8,500 is below our threshold, but it's kind of an orphaned area where it wasn't accounted for on the operating budget, so we included that request with the capital plan. Next slide is the school's ask. So the next few slides talks about what the school will be spending the $900,000 that's been allocated for, requested for capital improvement plan for FY25. So Megan, if we can just go to the next chart without going through the specific, thank you. So when we looked at that $17 million, we then break it down into what's a Tier 1, what's a Tier 2, and what's a Tier 3. So if we're looking at FY25, just shy of $4 million was Tier 1 projects. For Tier 2 projects, the request was a little over $9 million. And for Tier 3 was $4 million, and it's from engineering, and it's mostly road, sidewalks, et cetera, improvements, infrastructure improvements. Next slide. So the funding plan. What we do is, according to the policy, we look at the current fund levy within the general fund levy. So for FY25, of $105 million levy that we have, on 2% for a capital outlay target means that we would have $2.1 million to spend on capital projects at 2%. And at 3%, it would be a little over $3 million. And that's for Tier 1. For Tier 2, with the 5% debt service target, that would be a little over, well, little shy of $5.3 million for Tier 2 projects. Next slide. So when we look at the Tier 1 projects, the requests Again, that was for just shy of $4 million. Looking at the target, at 2%, we come short, about just shy of $1.9 million of funding those projects in whole. And for a 3% target, we still fall short about $823,000. Next slide, Megan. Tier 2, the request was a little bit more than $9 million, of which on the 5%, we would come short by about just shy of $3.9 million on all the projects that were requested by departments. So what we do is we now meet with department heads and go through each one of the capital projects and try to determine, obviously we don't have enough funds to fund all of the projects, so we have to determine what can we do by possibly deferring to another year, what's most important that we get done this year. So as we go through that process, the recommendations are on the next few slides, and I'll just read the department, what was requested, and where the funding would be coming from. So the police is $769,200. $419,200 was for Tier 1 cash, and Tier 2 was $350,000. Fire department requested $537,380, of which Tier 1 recommended projects moving forward was $89,800, and using ARPA funds for $208,480. For information technology, the request was for $458,000. Moving forward, that's $258,000 would be for Tier 1 cash, and $100,000 would be used for ARPA, and we defer some projects to the next fiscal year. For Public Works Facilities, the request was $1.9 million plus, of which Tier 1 cash was $100,000, and 1.8 was looking at other funding sources, possibly the rec revolving fund to fund some of these projects, but right now they're not having to determine what we would do yet. Public Works Engineering, the request was for $8.6 million. Moving forward, with Tier 1 would be $676,300, Tier 2, $3 million, and $257,000 of ARPA. And $650,000 is other, that's the Chapter 90 funds that would go towards, in addition to the $2 million for roads. For Parks and Trees, the request was for $296,000, of which recommended projects for Tier 1 was $196,000, and $100,000 using ARPA funds. For the cemetery, the request was for $40,000. The recommendation is to utilize the cemetery perpetual care funds for those projects. For Public Works, Highway and Maintenance, the request was originally for $1 million, $44,000. Recommended Tier 1 projects were $294,000 and $750,000 for Tier 2. For Planning and Land Management, $140,000 was the request, of which $140,000 was recommended for Tier 1 projects. For General Government, the request was for $2.4 million, of which only $100,000 was made to go forward using ARPA funds. Not that we're not attacking those others, they were addressed in other departments' budgets, so therefore they were already accounted for, the rest of the requests. The school's $900,000, and that would be Tier 2 moving forward. Library request was for $60,000, of which recommended Tier 1 projects was $15,000, and deferring the rest to FY26. Veterans Agent, electric vehicle, $35,000. excuse me, $25,000 would be a tier 1, and the $10,000 would be using the electrification of the fleet fund, gift fund that we have available to electrify our fleet. For the Council on Aging, the transport vehicle, $130,000. That's recommended for a tier 1 project for $130,000. Town clerk is the poll place scanner and tabulator for $8,500, and that would be recommended to go forward with the project on tier 1 for $8,500. The next slide is the tier 1 funding plan. So the recommended FY25 projects was $2,341,800, of which, based on that 2% target, capital outlay target, we'd still be short $226,000 moving forward. Next slide. So the tier 2 funding plan, the request was $9 million. The recommended projects to go forward would be $5 million, which conforms to our policy of 5% of the levy. Those are our tier 1 and tier 2, and I think Terry's going to talk a little bit more about the tier 3 projects.
Before we go on with this, I wonder if it would be more helpful to essentially summarize or generally comment on the numbers, because we're seeing, just reading off slides that we can't even see or read doesn't seem to be that helpful. So I don't know what, and of course, we have copies of these slides in our packages, and at least the members of the board have had a chance to go through them, and maybe it'd be more productive to just kind of get to the bottom line and solicit comments.
Actually, I would like to hear about the Tier 3 projects coming up in the future, because I think it's something that needs some visibility.
Okay.
Yeah, so I will just spend a couple of moments on that. I did want to make a couple of notes. First, that the school $900,000, we're showing that as Tier 2 right now. We're still working through that. We believe that maybe some of those items are Tier 1. And so that's some of the work that we're continuing to do there.
Talk more about that when the schools come up to the microphone?
I think we can, particularly if the board has questions or
Yeah.
if the school committee has
Yeah, I have questions also.
Do we have an updated schedule of different than what it's in this packet? Or is what's in this packet what we should direct our questions to?
I'm happy to answer that, and I probably need a microphone.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So I think we're in an early part of a discussion. We have not been asked to revisit the plan. We have not done that yet with the school committee. We only heard feedback 2 weeks ago from the finance committee, now understanding that the 900,000 would be borrowed, and it's sounding like we're looking for a change in process, which we're not opposed to, but difficult at this late hour to totally make a whole new capital plan after months of building that one. The 900,000 has been a longstanding practice here. My entire tenure, the town managers allocated the 900,000, and there's always been some small items in there, not as many as this time. So we're happy to have that conversation. I think there's a lot more to talk about in terms of when and how we're going to make any changes. I don't think we've heard clearly that we've been asked to up until now. This is the plan the school committee voted and identified the needs that we have.
I think the issue really is just how it's funded. So Tier 1, it's cash. Tier 2, it's debt.
Well, can we just go over the definitions and for everybody, so we're all on the same
Well,
page?
it was on Anthony's slide.
Yeah, but can we just take a breath?
Tier 1 projects are funded with cash, through cash. Generally, on the town side, we go up to $250,000. In the capital planning task force, it was up to $100,000.
In the operating budgets, right? Or not?
So on the town side, it's been part of the guidelines budget. So it is a separate appropriation under a separate warrant article, but it's cash and considered within the guidelines budget of the town.
So, for example, the $130,000 for the COA van, you're showing that as tier 1.
As tier 1,
because you're using a definition of 250, but sometimes we use a definition of 100,000.
For town tier 1, we moved that up to $250,000 last fiscal year when we started seeing the price of trucks and vans exceeding the $100,000.
Okay.
And we just don't have the capacity in tier 2 to be moving those vehicles over to tier 2. If we do, it's at the expense then of road maintenance, essentially.
The other thing is that when we use cash, we simply pay for something. When we put it in tier 2, we assume some debt, and there's some additional cost on top of that. So I'm wondering whether you could characterize for us how much extra does it cost to fund small items, for example, in the tier 2 debt plan as opposed to paying for them in cash.
So I think one important thing to point out is Mass General Law identifies what items can be funded, not what types of items can be funded through the issuance of debt. Right. And then it's a matter of the interest rate minus any premiums that we receive. So depending on those two things and the term of the issuance, you could be paying 25% more over the life of the bonds.
So to summarize, it seems like, whenever you can pay cash, it's better, because in tier 2, if you're going to borrow, you're going to pay interest cost. It might not be allowed in Mass General Law, but I think also we've had a practice of borrowing for road maintenance for many years that maybe we're living beyond our means and we should be paying as we go. So there's certain advantages, I guess, to tier 1 whenever we can do it, the way I see it.
I'd like to just talk for a minute back to the 900K for a minute. I think when this was originally started, which was years ago, right? This was started up by, I think, Chris Whalen. And the purpose of it was to give the school some money so that they could keep their buildings sound. And over the years, it's changed. So that and it was debt. It was debt to keep buildings sound. And over the years, something's changed where instead of that money being used for that purpose, it's being used for what I would call operating expenses, like desks, for example, right? And so we've kind of drifted away from the original intent of the 900K. And also, the other thing that concerns me is that what I see in this preliminary thing for the 900K, the preliminary schedule, I don't see any investments being made in improvements to the buildings, such as for the boilers, for example. I remember a few years ago, you came for the boilers for the Alcott, and then we got into a discussion about what's the sustainable solution here, and that's just fallen off. So what's happening with the boilers?
Yeah, so we're in last year.
I'm concerned that the money is being, let me just finish.
Okay.
I'm concerned that the money that was allocated for, again, keeping our buildings dry and warm is not being spent for that. So we've got to find a way to come up with money for that. And the money that's being, and things that are truly operating expenses should be in the operating budget. That's just sound financial management.
Right.
So those are my feelings about the 900K.
So if I could respond, we are in the throes of a facility study that was funded through the $900,000 a year ago, last town meeting. And that's going to be a comprehensive study of all K-5 buildings and Ripley so that we can identify the areas of need and then prioritize them.
Great.
We made a sound choice and had this discussion with the school committee not to bring some of those large-scale projects that have come up in the past until the study is complete, to be sure that the priorities are actually vetted against the new information we're going to get from those that are out in preparing to study the schools. So we're in the throes of bringing you that very comprehensive plan for large-scale items. I think this year's plan, we purposely didn't want to do that, because if we funded something that isn't the top priority at the end of the study, that didn't seem logical to us to preempt it.
Are you talking about the Thoreau campus master?
No, that's a different study. Last year, we funded a facility study across all of K-5 and Ripley.
900K?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask, what is your timetable for the facility study being complete?
Sure.
It's being worked on right now. Later in the spring, we'll have a preliminary report from the consultants that will be shared with us and then with the school committee. And that's intended to be our guide for future capital plans.
Okay, so I'm wondering, it sounds like you'll have a pretty good idea, if not final priorities, by July 1. And this budget we're talking about now takes effect July 1. So I'm wondering if it's possible, because I agree with Mary, I don't think we should be funding operating expenses, but you're going to, before July 1, identify some top priorities. And so if we put the 900,000 in, but we don't know which priorities you're going to choose yet, can we do that? I guess that's what I'm saying.
Those are discussions we're going to have with the school committee once we get the reports back and
Great.
see what the priorities are.
So I'm wondering, thank you for doing the longer range planning. In meetings like this, we always seem to focus on that leftmost column, which is the year we're currently planning. But I think that it's important to also have the next 4 years as outlined in the expenditure policy so that we have a 5-year capital plan. And so can we expect that the output of this work is going to be something that looks more like that matrix that we're going to be able to see so that there's some visibility going forward?
Yeah, that's the entire intent.
Okay.
And that will be all the tiers? Is that plan going to look at all?
It would be all 3 elementary schools in the Ripley building. There's not necessarily a need to do it because we'll have a new middle school. So it'll be all the Concord Public Schools buildings.
But it's not the high school.
It's a separate district.
I know that,
Yeah.
but are you going to be looking at that as well?
At some point, but when the building's 10 years old, I don't think it makes sense to pay for a study for a building that's 10 years old.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
I did want to point out, too, we do have items, I understand your point, Mary, there are things on here that are, I would say, capital, like improvements to, that are going to have a life of multiple years. Last year, we had the Thoreau ERU replacement. That's going to happen. That's a multi-$100,000 project. So there are those projects as well. We felt like it didn't make sense to do that this year when we're going to have consultants tell us what our long-term plan is and not to preempt kind of what their findings are.
I am worried about the Alcott boilers. Will that be will that be in the plan as well? And are you working? I have 2 questions there. I'm assuming that will be in the plan. And are you working with the sustainability groups within Concord so that when you get the solution, it will be something that is energy efficient?
Want to have those conversations going forward. Megan and I and Eric Sims and Bob have spoken on the Alcott boiler.
Okay.
So we're in this, fiscal place to have the conversations at a town level. The boiler's got many, many years of life ahead of it as is. So we're going to need help juggling priorities of replacing things for sustainable purposes versus replacing things for keeping the building heated, cooled, all the things you just mentioned.
Yep.
And those seem to keep competing with one another. So I'm hoping the study helps us all start to have that conversation at a high level, because we're feeling a little caught in.
Yeah, I understand. I remember.
To say the least. Yeah. So
let's see.
Let's talk that through.
Yeah, let's talk that through.
And
Yeah,
we face
absolutely.
the same thing with replacement of vehicles.
Yes. Electric buses, which aren't tonight's topic, are in the
I see,
same category.
and police vehicles as well.
What's interesting to note that has always fascinated me when we do certain capital things the way we've been doing them, the buses are all in the operating budget. So to your point, I think we're in need of having this
Aren't they leased,
conversation.
though? Aren't they leased? Are the
They are
buses-
leased, but even when we've bought them, they've been in. So
Oh.
leasing has been a recent
Okay, so that's another thing we have to
evolution.
clean up.
I think that tends to occur when there are multiple. There's like 35 or 40 buses, and the life expectancy of a bus is less than that number of years, and so you can expect that there's going to be a replacement rate of a certain number of buses per year, usually one or two. And so we see that, and so it's kind of like road maintenance. We see that there's going to be an ongoing expenditure, and then to Terry's point, it really makes sense to start talking about if we're going to be buying a bus or two buses every single year, then why shouldn't we be paying cash for that as opposed to borrowing and just adding 20 or 25% to that overall cost? Because over a fairly short number of years, we start to see some savings if we can figure out how to get to the point where we're not funding these things in debt, because debt is how municipalities get themselves into trouble, as I'm sure the Finance Committee would like to remind us.
One of the things I wanted to ask both Anthony and the town, and we brought it up with the schools, is some kind of a better integration between our sustainability goals and our capital plan. Because I know in the town's budget, there's some things in there that are electrifying vehicles and things, but I guess the process is going to each department, and we should be hearing from not only the sustainability groups, but our sustainability director as far as what are some investments we need to be making to meet our sustainability goals. I know we can't do it this year. I know that, right? You've already done a great job getting us to this point, but moving forward, I'm hoping that's a more integrated conversation.
So I think we can certainly do better, but we are following the fleet electrification policy when we are replacing vehicles. We have a significant project in fiscal '25, which would be the replacement of the boiler in this building. We are working with the sustainability director and facilities to come up with a fossil-free fuel solution. So that is in there. We do have I guess I would say our facilities department is going through a reboot. And so we haven't brought forward significant facilities projects other than for this building. And again, we are working with sustainability to come up with a better solution.
That's great. See, I didn't know that, because the way we presented here, I couldn't pull that out.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear what you just told us.
Just if I could make a few additional comments and then just spend a minute on Tier 3. I'm not seeing anything in the school's capital plan that is operating. What we are seeing are things that we would consider Tier 1. So, and we wouldn't ever be financing Tier 1 items. But there are items in the school's capital plan which are not that different than our Tier 1 projects. So I wanted to make that point. I also wanted to make the point that Anthony mentioned ARPA funding in several different areas. We are contemplating programming 50% of the ARPA allocation within capital. There may be more as we finalize the plan, but right now we are using 50%, which is about $700,000 or $800,000 or so. And then if I could just spend a couple of minutes on the Tier 3, I think we spent a lot of time last year, so I don't want to go through those in detail, but you know that we have significant needs with our public works facility and our public safety complex. We do have a total of $300,000 allocated for a feasibility study for those two facilities, trying to understand what we might be doing with them. Will those facilities stay in their current location, or are there better locations for them? But we have that project will be kicked off yet this fiscal year. So we don't have any new information other than to just reiterate that we have significant building needs in those two areas. And then I wanted to spend a minute on public works infrastructure. So we currently have road improvements identified as Tier 2. But if you look at the total of road improvements programmed in this 5-year period, it meets the definition of a Tier 3 project. And so we right now are contemplating, would we pull that out as a Tier 3 project and potentially put that forward as excluded debt?
Yep.
And so I just want to mention that you will hear more about that, but that is something that we are looking at. So last year when we went through this process, more so at the Finance Committee level, there was a discussion with our former interim CFO who talked about in the community that he had just retired from, that they paid cash for road improvements. Mm-hmm. We have a pattern of debt financing that's not dissimilar to what many, many communities do. But there was some interest in maybe transitioning from a debt-financed road maintenance program to a cash-financed program. And so I had floated the idea at a recent FinCom meeting and basically heard crickets. Nobody liked my idea. I thought it had a lot of merit. But it's basically looking out, not in this next 5-year period, but in the following 5-year periods where we potentially are satisfying our unfunded retirement liability, our unfunded OPEB liability, and setting aside those funds, which are cash within the budget, to potentially transition from a debt-financed program to a cash program. That didn't go over well. But that is an opportunity. We're certainly not making decisions on that, but a potential opportunity.
Carrie, I was at that conversation. Wasn't it, they wanted to decouple the conversation of saving money from the roads, and they were saying that maybe eventually we want to go away from financing road improvements with debt, but let's have that as an independent conversation. So I don't think I think we're all still open to moving towards towards cash for road improvement, not debt, because it's silly to use debt for a recurring, well,
Right.
some people think it's silly. But I think, at least I am still open to that, moving to cash. And if we find money someplace, then we know where to spend it.
Yeah.
Bob made a similar proposal to the regional school committee, if that makes you feel better.
Not for the roads, though.
No, for other capital projects.
So that's it. We potentially will be putting forward a sizable warrant article for roads as Tier 3. Anthony and I had a great conversation with town engineer Steve Dukran, and we do believe we have the data at a very granular level to show
Ground level.
Yeah, to show how and when money would be spent under that
Well,
program.
do you make an effort to distinguish between essentially what are capital improvements in roads such as the complete streets or the Commonwealth Avenue in West Concord, where you are completely essentially building a new road, which is a long-term investment, as opposed to resurfacing and pothole replacement or filling, which are essentially maintenance issues, and should not be capitalized.
Yeah, that is part of the discussion up until now, because we have been funding the need at about 50%. We're just looking at the highest priority, but the need is greater when you're talking about complete streets and the potential need to add bike lanes and other pedestrian-friendly components. So it is a growing need, but that's certainly one way to look at it. And Mary, I think you've probably said, when you talk about refreshing assets versus new,
Right.
same concept.
So I'm wondering if I'm reading this correctly about this proposal. It's a slide that says short-term. I don't think we got to that. Yeah, maybe this is it. It looks like for 10 years, it would add 500 and something thousand to the tax bill of an average house.
So this is a proposal, just what a potential $30 million issue would look like. And, using these set of assumptions,
Right.
it would be somewhere between $500 and $600 per year if the entire $30 million were issued at one time, which wouldn't happen because it would be issued in phases.
But that's the size of the problem, $30 million? You as approximately?
If we're looking at a 5-year solution, it's $25 to $30 million. That would take into account some of the complete street elements that we are looking to implement.
Because that's quite a large problem. I think it's really great that we're having this discussion, and it ties in with some other discussions, like our last meeting where we talked about, basically we've been spending beyond our means, and people are not acknowledging it. So the more we can talk about it, the better. And every time we borrow for recurring, like buses or road maintenance or any of this, we're adding to the problem. And now we have a $25 to $30 million problem so I'm really torn as to, I'd love to solve that problem right away. And yet, wow, that's quite a lot of money for 10 years for the average house. So
the annual need is about $5 million for maintenance. And then there's a potential additional $1 million per year that could be added to bring in some elements of complete street. So that's how we get to 25 to 30. And I think we've been saying for years, the annual need is about $5 million, and we've been funding it at about $2 million.
Right, and I think part of the problem, if I'm correct, is that Chapter 90 from the state has not been keeping up with the needs.
But I think there's a more fundamental problem than that, and that is that pavement condition index starts to drop off very precipitously at a certain point. And we have been underfunding this for a long time.
Yeah, so
and
it's
so the
catching
simple
up.
question I have is when the engineering department comes in and says $4.1 million, and the finance department comes back and says $2.6 million, what happens to pavement condition index at that point?
Right,
Because could we even afford to wait 4 or 5 years to rejigger the financing of the roads program? Meanwhile, the pavement condition index has gotten on the steep part of that curve.
Right, I think what we really need is that curve the next time this presentation occurs, in public, that curve it just says it all. If you're at the top part, you're okay. If you're in the middle, you're in real big trouble there. And
Exactly.
Well, that's already been done. Didn't we see that a year or two ago from Public Works?
Yes.
The percent condition of the road.
Right.
You see it
And how expensive it gets after it gets below
Yeah.
a certain level.
And
Right.
And it just becomes more and more expensive.
Yeah, and if you check
could
out
do
the last budget book where the pavement
Right.
condition index is published for the last decade, you can see that we're at that lip and starting to slide onto it. And I think that's the experience that many people are reporting on the roads too.
You
So
could-
my question really is, do we have even time to wait for a plan like this, or do we have to actually step up and at least fund the engineering request at the engineering request level in order to maintain what we have long enough to get to these deeper discussions about how to pay for it.
Well, yes, but we can't afford it either, so what are we,
Well, no, I think you could do a cost benefit.
Can we afford to have roads that are
Exactly.
really falling apart?
You could do a cost benefit analysis that said, what is the cost of raising the debt now versus the cost of having the roads deteriorate and cost more to repair later.
Right.
So, I mean, I would be surprised if it didn't show that debt would be more attractive than waiting to our roads to deteriorate even more and cost even more, unless we're okay with roads falling.
I'd like to just mention that I happen to live on a street where the Public Works Department has been attempting some other techniques to try and extend road life with varying degrees of success. But what I want to do is commend their efforts because they are actually trying to find some ways to manage this situation. And so, my question is, let's make sure that they have the resources that they need to address it as best they can while we deal with the difficulties of the financing.
Well, I think the main problem is going to be, I mean, even if this board unanimously wanted to, push forward to fund all of that in an article this year, would it be exempt debt? And then, are people going to vote for it? And I mean, you've got all these political questions that have to be considered besides the interest rates and everything.
And to be clear, I'm talking about how much of the Tier 2 request that has already been made for FY25 gets funded, not should we push a $30 million article this year, or I'm talking about let's figure out whether the program is getting what it needs to be.
Well, I think
effective.
we're agreeing it's not getting what it needs. That's how we got into this mess.
Yeah,
so.
but prospectively, when we vote a budget level for FY25, what should that budget level be?
Well, I can tell you that we can't push off all of the Tier 2 projects. And we do have significant amounts of data. And, I think as early January, we would have the information that people need to make an informed decision about whether or not this is something that they would support. And the thought was putting it forward as exempt debt so that voters could decide if this is, given everything that they are already funding, is this something that voters would be willing to do in addition to that?
So is this one of the articles who would be the sponsor of the article? Is this something we have to discuss at our next meeting?
I believe PwC would sponsor the article.
The town.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think that's the presentation. We're not done with our work yet. We did get a tier 1 allocation from the Finance Committee that was about 2.1 million.
If I summarize what you said to us, Anthony, the ask is 17 million, and based on all the sources that you're looking at, you're still short 6.7 million. So about 40% of the ask has not been covered by either the Tier 1 or the Tier 2 or ARPA or the cemetery fund, all these other little changes that you. You came in at 17 and you're at about 6.7 that you haven't found a home for. So.
Is there any opportunity to look for other revenues, even a little bit of an increase in user fees for recreation programs or lobbying for more Chapter 90 money or that transportation grant we talked about? Every little bit, I think, is worth looking at. And the other comment I just want to make is how valuable it is to really be having this conversation. And I thank the school committee for coming and the finance committee and everybody who's working on it, because this is a long-term problem that's going to take we took many years to get here. It's going to take many years to get out of it. And we have to keep working together to try to figure it out.
Yes, good. Well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we need to,
Are you taking?
do we need to,
You want to take any
What?
comments?
Oh, yeah, we take comments from the school
Public comment?
committee.
Do you want public comment or school committee comments? or-
what are we,
I think the school committee wants to comment.
sure, well,
Like
okay.
to
They just
adjourn?
want to adjourn.
Oh,
Well,
But
they,
does anybody have any questions or comments?
well, you don't have to have them.
You do have a question. We have two.
all right.
Use the microphone.
Court, you want to come up and use the mic? That would be great.
I'm certainly not speaking for the school committee. Court Booth, member of the school committee. I don't think we've thoroughly discussed this very recent work that's been done on the capital plan recommendation from the superintendent. So I think we'll be more ready to have the continued conversation in the future. I don't know if that comports with what the chairs think.
What did you say, Court?
I think we want to have these conversations. I don't think we're prepared tonight. But I don't think we need to delay much longer. We're just starting our budget deliberations tomorrow night.
So, Court, do you think the hearing would be the appropriate time to have this, or are you suggesting that we have another? Because
Personally, I think a continuation of this would be fine, but formally, I'd defer to the chairs.
okay, it's up to you. Yep.
Go ahead.
Wendy had a comment.
Wendy Ravelli, 42 Bow Street in Concord. I just had one question because I thought there might be an omission, but it may not be. Specifically, it was a question about, is there funding for the Beatty Center roof replacement? And that might be an enterprise fund question.
Yes.
A separate budget article.
It
And
is.
I might have missed it in the coordination
Yes.
meeting. So it's going to be a separate warrant
It's
article?
part of the recreation revolving account.
It's,
I'm
well,
sorry.
it's part of the BD enterprise, and we have not yet folded the enterprise fund requests into this document.
That's the answer, I guess.
It is. So we'll be seeing that at the hearings, right?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Good.
These are the FinCom hearings, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
No? Okay.
All right, so now are we done? Well, it sounds like the school committee people want to come back and talk about this more.
Well,
They
no,
wanna-
it was a suggestion, and it's really up to you and the chairs whether you want to do that or not.
And we will talk about that.
Yeah.
And potentially, we would have another session
Right,
similar to
potentially,
this.
exactly.
With more,
Up to
with
date.
more homework done before
Right,
we have
exactly,
it.
right.
And if we did that, we'd be talking about January or?
Right, January or
So when they'd be
February?
ready.
It's too early to get into that tonight. I think we should have our meeting tomorrow night and we'll go.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So-
I think it's a worthy idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
January or February, something like that.
Okay?
In the meantime, I think the school committee is anxious to adjourn.
Yes,
That's
I
what
could
they were
tell.
trying
I know
to
they're
get.
on the edge of their seat.
Well, they're used to
They
long
don't want to
meetings.
come back, they want to leave.
Oh,
We have another long meeting tomorrow night. So.
Okay,
Okay,
great, good.
great.
So do you need to do a roll call vote to adjourn or something?
Well, we can just adjourn, but I would like to formally adjourn.
Okay.
Thank
We
you.
don't have roll call. I'll adjourn the Concord Town House School Committee.
well, as far as we're concerned, you could just leave and then
Yeah, they'd still be in the
Or you can
meeting.
stay.
or stay. Yes, right.
Okay.
But we're remaining. The select board is remaining in session, and unless there's anything else before us, the next item of business is the update from the 2025 Executive Committee. Who is speaking for the committee?
Ooh,
Wow.
They brought props.
Sorry.
Megan, we don't even need to sign. We don't have anything to sign?
Okay, so,
You can take one of those microphones right
Grab
there.
that one.
Yeah.
okay, we're pretty much on schedule. We had this on for 7:35. We're now 7:40. Is that right? 7:50.
54.
Okay, so,
Close enough.
Close enough.
so, let's
Waited 10
get
minutes
going.
to get 20 minutes late. Okay.
All set?
All set.
Good.
We're sitting
Good.
down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Gary Clayton. I am Chair of the Concord's 250 Executive Committee. Sitting to my right, Rob Monroe,
Hi, friends.
Vice Chair. And in the audience this evening, there are numerous other volunteers who are serving on the committees and subcommittees of the Concord 250. And I'm just going to ask those who are, if you just raise your hand, as much for our television audience to see. Yeah, so we've got a number of folks involved. So thank you for being here this evening. What we'd like to do, thank you for taking time for this update relative to the work of the 250 Executive Committee. And the agenda that we have for you this evening will include, and you should have, I believe, in front of you, a one-pager. There's the one-pager on.
Yep.
Is that available? I'm sort of going to hold this up. Did it not show up?
Nope.
No? Okay, well, I can pass this around. Okay. So what I thought we'd do this evening with the time we have available is to provide a quick overview of the work we've been involved in, and do so by focusing on 6 major areas of interest on the part of the subcommittee and really of the town of Concord. And that includes the work relative to programs and events and other activities, the permanent memorial, the parade, and then we want to talk about some of the critical operational issues, including public safety and security, the intermunicipal agreement, and as part of our communications effort. And then finally, we want to talk about the budget, too. I will say at the outset that we've been working hard. There are now at least 100 volunteers and counting that are directly involved in the work of the committee. That is, when I say the committee, I'm now using that term broadly to identify, include all of the subcommittees that are involved as well. And that work has been underway really since the spring of 2022. And a lot of progress has been made. But we are coming very much to a critical juncture at this point in that we're not that far away from April 19th, 2025. And, we'll talk tonight about the budget, the intermunicipal agreement. We'll talk about tonight, but bring it back to the board for your action at your next board meeting this month. And then just mindful again of the role of volunteers, staff, and how important and critical that is, because we've done a lot, but we're now at a stage where there's going to be more that needs to be done, and a commitment of financial resources as well to kind of keep us moving and keeping us on track. So with that as a little bit of background, the package that you received from us, I'm not going to apologize. It was a voluminous package, but it actually was very much intended to reflect, again, the level and scope of work that we as volunteers have been very much engaged in. And so you have that as background reference material. We will not go through that page by page tonight, but the idea of focusing on these 6 key topics will speak to what's in your background package, you can always refer back to that. And if you have questions, either this evening or later, please feel free to contact me or Rob relative to that information. I will note that the work we do, is subject to the charge that the Select Board established and amended several times, and that still remains the framework for our work moving forward. That's included in your background package. I'll note that, again, there's an important and critical level of collaboration that's going on within Concord and other towns, and I'll ask Rob to take a moment just to speak to that, what we're involved in terms of collaboration, and then we'll move on to speaking to the specific 6 key topics tonight.
Yeah, so thanks, Gary. So I think really in earnest since last March, Concord's been engaged with Lexington and other towns, namely Lincoln and Arlington, to coordinate efforts around events, programming, public safety, and budget to make sure that the events that will happen on that weekend are streamlined, and that the visitor experience and the resident experience of all of these towns feels really good and is safe ultimately. And so as much work as we've done as a town, and we've solicited significant feedback from a number of people, residents and volunteers in town, it's been equally as critical to hear voices from neighboring towns and recognize that even if previous April 19th celebrations have been more siloed in their approach, this one is not and can't be, in order to ensure that it goes really, really smoothly. And in a little bit, when we get to communications in the IMA, I'll speak more granularly to that. But it has been an incredible effort with hundreds of volunteers across these towns. And really since July of this summer, when our executive committee voted to approve the intermunicipal agreement, we've really hit the ground running with our peers in other towns to make sure that we can, over these next 18 months, make a lot of stuff happen. And so I think with that, I'd love to go into more specifics and ask Joe. Where's Joe? There you are. Hello. Joe, to speak to some of the programs and events that we're planning.
So as Gary remember saying, there's 6 key areas, and the first area I'm just going to talk about is the sort of program and events and activities. These are the things that we're trying to plan to engage both the folks in town and the people who visit with what is the stuff of the 250th celebration. The most important thing based on the Select Board's charge is we're celebrating the birth of American freedom. And we're celebrating that and what happened on April 19th, 1775. And celebrating not just what happened that day, not just that moment in time, but the expansion of freedom over the last 250 years, the gift we have of living in a country that has continually expanded freedom. So we hope that the celebration not only celebrates the day, but all the awesome growth that we've seen in our country over the last 250 years. So it's more than just a moment in time. One way we're trying to do that for our residents is to try to create at least monthly activities or events that folks can engage in. Something when we started in April, because this will go between 2023 and 2026. In April of this year, we started with the Ellen Garrison event as an example of something that people can get engaged in around the expansion of American freedom. This summer with the work around Glory for George event, something as simple as the fall, back in November for Veterans Day, we celebrated the Vietnam veterans who expanded their role of freedom and protest here in Concord in 1771. So that people start seeing that the 250th is more than just that one day. It's really many years and many ways to celebrate and engage. The next thing that's coming up in January, we'll be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Concord Town Meeting. Concord Town Meeting that decided to have a little discussion about what to do about the Tea Party. So that's just to give you some examples of the type of things that we're working on. And it's not just our events. There's also, we've got committees that are working on arts and literature, community engagement, and history, things that they're planning, such as whether it's maybe a mural going somewhere in town, whether it's new music pieces being written, whether it's engaging high school students in writing essays around the expansion of freedom, the amazing work the history committee's done in engaging teachers and training. The historians have uncovered, and Beth is here, so I have to say her name, uncovering many new veterans we didn't know or weren't properly identified that served in the Revolutionary War from Concord. And then most recently, Beth did the research to identify a brand new Patriot of Color that we didn't even know was a Concord resident that's now listed on the National Park website because of that work. So I'm just trying to get you to see it's more than just the events, but it's also all these other groups, so that in the end, that our folks who live in this town feel like they really had a full experience. And then finally, of course, the big day, April 19th, 2025, we're trying to plan events and activities that go from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., not just going from dawn salute to the ceremony, to a parade, to a music festival, to a light show at the end, so that in the end, people really feel like it was a celebration worth enjoying. Bottom line, we want things that are no cost and low cost for families so that people can access them and participate in them. And really the biggest event of April 19th is the parade, and I was going to turn this over to my colleague, John. But Rob, talk about the event that people really want to know about, the parade.
Yeah, I'm a poor substitute for John Arena, who chairs our parade committee, but I'll do the best I can. So in the packet, you'll note that we have our most recent committee report from John Arena, and really the aim of the parade in 2025 is to have a bigger celebration than we would normally have on a year-to-year basis, and to tell two stories, right? And hopefully these stories are intertwined, and we spent quite a bit of time. John did some really great work to figure out what the theme of this parade would be. So I'll read this just very quickly. The parade will aim to tell two stories that historically are interwoven and inextricable yet distinct: the history and civic growth of our nation and the history and civic growth of our town in Concord. And so as the scope of this parade expands to really fulfill that, John and his team and many others in town are working really closely on an invitation list, working really closely with Minutemen and many other companies to make sure that it's an inclusive event, working alongside the National Park Service. Simone Monteleone, superintendent, has been a phenomenal thought partner with us. You'll note the National Park Service's events in the packet as well. But really the aim of this parade is to celebrate the town in the context of the nation and do so in a way that is safe, right? So throughout this evening and throughout this packet, you'll note underscoring all of this stuff is public safety, right? And so John has done a really great job finalizing the route, which will look, for those of you who were around in 1975, would look somewhat similar. From what I hear, forming on Thoreau Street near Hubbard, goes along Sudbury Road, Main Street to Lowell Road, Liberty to Monument Street, and then proceeding through Monument Square onto Lexington, hopefully ending around Haywood. And so it is an expanded route. It's an exciting route. Those who are marching better bring their legs. They're going to be getting all their steps in that day. But it will have enough space to accommodate a significant number of visitors and residents, and should be an incredible kickoff to that Saturday, the 19th.
Good. Thank you, Rob. And I'll speak now to the permanent memorial. This is the third of, we'll call broadly, the programmatic plans, vision and plans. Again, programming events and activities, the parade, and then the permanent memorial. Before I jump into that, I just want to mention, I was thinking that the theme you'll hear tonight is there's a lot of interaction, engagement, and collaboration with various partners within Concord, with the National Park Service, the other nearby towns. But I'm also mindful, and we should all be, as we have, looked very carefully at the calendar for 2025, because the parade will be celebrated on April 19th, which is a Saturday. The following day, Sunday, is Easter Sunday. The day after that is Marathon Monday. So Rob and I will be beginning conversations with a colleague at the Boston Athletic Association relative to their efforts in planning and opening up lines of communication with them as well. So it's going to be interesting.
As well as the town's interfaith community, to ensure that the events that we hold over those 2 weekends, which are holy weekends for a number of major faith traditions, that we're sensitive to that, and that folks feel seen and affirmed those weekends.
Yes. Thank you, Rob. So the permanent memorial, again, in your package, there's a summary of the work that the Permanent Memorial Subcommittee has been engaged in. And what we have done in that regard is actually recognize sort of 3 areas of focus or goals that we are recommending constitute the basis of a permanent memorial. And I would ask all of us to, because I include myself in this, when I hear the word a permanent memorial, there's perhaps immediate default is to think of a large granite block, and take nothing away from any of those important designations that in ways that we have celebrated achievements and individuals in the past. We are and deliberately wanting to think broadly that a memorial can take on many forms. And that may seem unusual, radical thought. It's not, because in Concord, if one looks back over the last 100 plus years, the permanent memorials, and they were not always established in these 25-year segments, but since the Minuteman statue at the North Bridge is the sort of the iconic representation, if you will, of a permanent memorial. But our predecessors also acquired land here at Monument Square, which they did, and the town dedicated that for municipal purposes. That was in 1900. In 1975, what the town decided it would do as a permanent memorial is contribute to the acquisition of 51 Walden. And if you recall, when you walk up the steps to 51 Walden, there's a brass plaque that says this was the bicentennial gift. As I did some research on this, I realized, well, our predecessors were thinking broadly about what that might mean. And that's what we tried to do and promote as we look ahead to 2025. 3 areas of focus. One is building on the work that the History and Education Subcommittee of the 250th effort has been engaged in. John alluded to that, and that is a identification of those Concord residents who served in the Revolutionary War. One might think after 250 years, that's been settled long ago. It hasn't been. And then those Concordians who died in their military service during the Revolution. So again, kudos to our members of the History and Education Subcommittee, but I saw that as an opportunity to build upon the research they are doing to help provide a more detailed and complete record of those who served in the American Revolution. But we're also looking at opportunities to take the materials of other Concord veterans who served from the American Revolution, in this case through World War II. We have a fair amount of material in the special collections section of the library. That's the good news. The bad news is it's never been cataloged. It's never been processed. So some of that material either needs to be conserved because it's very old and falling apart, or it simply needs to be made accessible and made available, which I hope can then in the future be the basis of exhibits and programs that can be provided at the library, at the Concord Museum, with the Armory, et cetera. So that's one element of our permanent memorial effort. The second is recognizing that we look to the past for inspiration. We're busy with what we are contending with now, but we also want memorials to look ahead to the future. And one aspect of that is to promote the idea of planting 250 trees across the town to acknowledge the 250th anniversary of the beginning of the American Revolution in Concord, but also mindful that we're in the midst of a serious climate crisis, and this is one step for us to take to recognize that when we plant these trees, we're planting them very much for the future and for those who follow. Mm-hmm. And thirdly, the other goal that we're actively pursuing is looking at that land here at Monument Square. I mentioned in 1900, our predecessors acquired what was the old Middlesex Hotel. At the time, it was abandoned. It was deemed to be an eyesore. And a few folks got together and said, this is what we want to do. We want to remove it, clear the site, and dedicate it for municipal purposes. So today, the municipal purposes include a number of the war memorials, includes the parking area, municipal parking area behind Vanderhoof's and others, but there's also a small amount of remaining green space that we're looking at as a space that may serve as an important small memorial park that can be both a space for people to gather, to reflect, where tour guides, as they do today, can bring guests from out of town, because in that location, you have a wonderful view of a lot of historic buildings and places here at Monument Square. So we're working on that, and we have held 2, and we'll hold a 3rd public hearing and public forum, really, on the designs that we are contemplating relative to how that space might be used. So that's the important part of what we're looking forward to. And that third public forum will take place on January 17th, 2024. Again, there's more information in your package about that. Moving along to the next area of focus for this evening's presentation, and that is safety and security, which, as we've touched on now a number of times in this presentation, is absolutely key and essential to what we do and what we plan for 2025. I'm going to ask Fred Ryan if you would. There he is, right here. I knew.
Take a lecture?
Yes, please. Fred Ryan is the chair of our subcommittee on public safety and security.
Thank you, Gary. Honorable Chair, members of the board. Fred Ryan, as Gary said, chair of the Public Safety Committee. My background is indeed in law enforcement. Our committee has been working with your fire chief, your police chief, public works director, and many others to begin the planning process for a ICS FEMA compliant incident management plan for the parade of April 2025. But equally as important, we've been working regionally. As we look back historically, we understand that there may have been some challenges with communication and sharing of resources during prior major celebrations, 1975 and others. So we formed a regional planning group with all of our municipal partners, while simultaneously developing an event action plan for Concord specifically. So if you can think of it globally, unified command, multi-jurisdictional, MEMA, all of our federal and state partners in a unified coordination center at a location a secure location to be determined, and then an individual event action plan for all of our events in Concord during. We're focusing right now on the the critical weekend at hand. And so just briefly, if I may, Gary, just to sort of highlight the complexity of some of the work that's going on. We have a regional work group that's working and developing plans for regional tactical operations, EOD and CBRN, that's chemical, biological, radiological, explosive devices, intelligence and investigations. I know our police chief is already engaged with his federal partners, and we're working on the very important task of identifying the resources that we'll need and recognizing that 2 days later, many of those resources have already been committed to the Boston Marathon. Public safety communications, public information and emergency alerting, which includes planning for hazardous weather and other unknown and unforeseen events. And family reunification area, not only for reunifying families following a critical incident, but missing persons and all the other incidents that might occur when we have a major complex events such as this one. And then in terms of planning our own municipal resources, we want to be cognizant of developing a plan that contemplates a measured response. We don't want to overplan. We also don't know what the political climate will be, and we need to be prepared for protesters, counter-protesters, and the ability to manage those incidents in a manner that protects the constitutional rights of all of those people participating in those potential protests, but also ensuring for the safety and security of the folks that are celebrating. And meanwhile, by the way, ensuring that we can continue to provide the day-to-day services for police, fire, and EMS that will be required throughout the events. So, in short, the planning's ongoing. Until it's completed and approved, by the manager and others. It's not yet published, but at some point in time, we will have an event action plan that's available to the select board and the executive leadership of the town. Happy to answer any questions when the time is appropriate.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. We'll move on to our efforts relative to communication, and particularly the intermunicipal agreement. which, again, is included in your background package. And that is a matter that we've been working on as a committee. I'm going to ask Rob at this point to speak to that as well.
Yeah, so communicating an event like this is really difficult because obviously we want to make sure that we are communicating this well in advance to I'd say internally to the residents of Concord, not only about the events itself, but also the process that we're undertaking. We've done, I think, a very strong job of making our process open, inclusive, and really soliciting a lot of feedback along the way. And Diane Proctor and her communications team have done phenomenal work in that regard. But we also recognize that the visitors, the economic benefit, all of that, really rising tide lifts all boats is seen both here in Concord, but in our neighboring towns as well. And so we want to ensure that our communication is also expansive enough to support the work that is happening in Arlington, Lincoln, and Lexington, and also find people that are coming from around the country and around the world. We're anticipating hundreds of thousands of visitors descending upon our small towns here, and that's really exciting. And if we don't communicate that well, and if we don't communicate that in a diverse way, we're not going to be prepared for that, and the people won't know what's going on. And so we're going to work really closely. We have a website designed. We're going to work with social media. We're working closely with our friends over at Freedom's Way National Heritage Area and Pratish Tedesco, who's been incredible about getting the word out. And then we've held a number of intermunicipal meetings. The first one was in May in Lexington. Then we hosted here in June in Concord. We've had a couple since then. And our next one is on Wednesday evening in Arlington, so that we can share ideas and share events and make sure that we are all on the same page moving forward, right? And so that leads us to our intermunicipal agreement. Over the spring, we decided as 4 towns and town leadership to put together this intermunicipal agreement to codify the collaboration of these 4 towns. And the areas that we are working on with this agreement are marketing, public relations, and event management. Recognizing that all the towns that are doing this rely on volunteers and oftentimes town staff with limited bandwidth, we really felt the need to hire professional help to make sure that we can implement all of the strategic plans that we have been developing over the past couple of years. And so the IMA proposal, which is in your packet, was developed many months ago, brought to our committee in July to be approved by our committee on the 27th. And then as of November 20th, Arlington, which was one town that was having a lot of conversations around it, approved the IMA. And we here in Concord are the only holdouts. And so we are working really closely to move from this IMA to an RFP process to ensure that we can do an efficient but inclusive search for the right firm and really get the ball rolling at the start of the new year. We are also the lead municipality and the only municipality who have not signed this intermunicipal agreement. And so to the extent that I can stress the significance of this board acting on this as soon as possible, I can't underscore that enough. The other towns are waiting for our action and really need us to push this forward. The hope is that at the start of the new calendar year, we can get the proposal out, we can solidify that within a month, and then move forward with our planning, which gives us around 14 months as our 4 towns to implement all of these plans, which is not a lot of time, but it's the time we're given, and we're going to work very efficiently through that.
Good, thank you, Rob. And Rob will be Wednesday evening, attending another intermunicipal meeting with our partners from the other 3 communities, as well as some other representatives from the state, I think,
right, yes.
will be attending that meeting in Arlington on Wednesday evening. So the discussions and the conversations move forward and continue. And as Rob said, this is a key part of actions that need to happen. As I said in my opening remarks, we're at a critical juncture relative to our work, and this is a step that needs to be taken in the very near future. The other important aspect of our work and the final focus area that we want to speak to and report on is the budget, because we've done a lot with very little expenditure at this point in time. A lot of sweat equity has gone into this, and I'm not exaggerating that there have been literally thousands of volunteer hours committed to this, but we are at a point where we have to be have a budget in place to determine and guide us as we move forward. A draft of that budget is in your package as well. It includes what we identify as currently available funds, which are in the amount of $700,000. And then the other column represents other funding as needed. At the moment, we are looking at specifically additional funding being needed for public safety and security, which at this point we believe would require an article in the town meeting warrant to help us meet that goal. I will say that we're also very mindful of the fact that while we're looking at existing public funds, and the $700,000 budget is predicated on the existence of those funds, we recognize additional funding is needed, and we realize that we have to look for sources beyond necessarily public funding through town meeting. And that can take a variety of forms, and it already is. Now, it's pursuing grants, and a number of our partners have been actively doing so. I'll pass around a wonderful example that just came to my attention. It would have been in the package other than, in this case, the good news keeps rolling in, so here we go. And this is information prepared by the Concord Museum. It relates to two significant grant awards that they received. One in the amount of $100,000 for what will be a 250th exhibit. I'm looking at David Wood, who's curator at the Concord Museum, and you may want to speak briefly to this, as well as the other 45,000. Why don't you stand there, David, and just very, very briefly speak to this, because it's a good example of the fundraising efforts that, one example of what we have to pursue.
Right. On one side of that is a release on the, they call it a prize. It's from the Decorative Arts Trust, the prize for excellence in innovation. That was a $100,000 grant from Decorative Arts Trust. And then the other is for a $75,000 grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, that for planning for the suite of 3 exhibitions that we'll be doing in 2025 and 26, grouped together under the rubric of Whose Revolution.
Great. Thank you, David. We're also pursuing and have applied for community preservation funds to help support the tree planting initiative. We're talking to the Garden Club of Concord about some support for that initiative as well. So there's a number of efforts moving forward in that regard. I'll ask Rick Laughlin over there, who's chair of our finance subcommittee, who's also been involved, of course, in helping us put together this latest draft of our operating budget, but also to speak about some of the pending other fundraising initiatives.
Thanks, Gary. Pretty much the Finance Committee was involved with the budgets for several months. Our latest focus, we're now currently meeting a couple of times a month to really get into our fundraising initiatives. In January, we plan on sending out sponsorship information and letters to the local businesses. The second piece of that will also be identifying local philanthropists to send things to them to see what kind of money they might want to contribute to this particular event. And the final piece probably for fundraising, which is not a huge number, but I think in April of '24, we want to use the ceremonies around that to send out a townwide mailing for all the citizens to have an opportunity to donate to this particular Concord 250. We're also, the local, our committee plus the local legislators, we still have some hope for state funding. It's in the mix, and I think the piece there, as Fred and Gary both mentioned, is public safety. The state needs to be heavily involved in thinking about the public safety issue and what kind of money they can give to towns like Concord and Lexington, who are going to have the significant amount of tourists and people attending for parades. So that's the brief snapshot on fundraising. We talk about a goal of about 500,000. My committee got a little boisterous the other night and said we should be going for $1 million. I said, let's go for the 500 to start and see where we go when we start sending out some of this information. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And one other final point relative to various fundraising ideas, and we included this in the package, is commemorative coins, which have been developed and minted in past celebrations, and there's an opportunity to raise some income in that regard as well. I would note, and I think the board is aware of this, that a year ago, the Concord 250 Corporation was established. It's a private corporation, and we've recently filed paperwork now to establish that as a nonprofit organization, the paperwork with the Internal Revenue Service. The goal there, of course, is to provide one more vehicle by which we hope we can appeal to donors who would be interested in making donations and do it in a way that they're perhaps most uncomfortable with in terms as they work with various public charities throughout the state. So that is in the works as well. So in summary, the budget, as I say, is still draft form. We're mindful, though, of the January 3rd deadline for the closing of the town warrant. We're also very mindful that there are significant taxpayer dollars here, but it is, and I would urge us to look at this as very much an investment, because we are looking at incredible, and sources have certainly looked at the impact of a 2025 celebration, the 250th celebration, as one that could bring up to 250,000 people into these immediate towns. And with that comes an opportunity for economic gain, I hope, on the part of local businesses, to some degree with the town, and also, of course, it's an opportunity for this town to stand one more time in the light and hopefully continue to attract people who will want to come back to Concord and visit again in the future. So that wraps up our overview of our work to date. A lot going on. Again, much more detail in your package, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have at this point in time. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Joe, Rick, Fred. Does the board have any comments or questions?
I have a few questions.
Oh, please.
First, great. Thank you for this work. It's a lot of people, a lot of energy. Really, thank you. It's kind of like herding cats, I think, but it'll be good.
It's one way to describe it.
It's now time to kind of organize it. That's and
right.
get it baked. Okay. So I'm looking at the budget, and I see that you've got 700,000, and that's ARPA funds, and 200,000 from the state, right? And then it says that you need an additional 1.25 million, right? And I thought I heard that the goal was 500,000 for fundraising. So I guess my thoughts are, out of that 1.25 million, I know you've got a lot of discretion on some of the things that you're going to be spending that money on, but I don't think you have much discretion around public safety, right? No. So when do you think you'll have a really firm number on what you need for public safety?
Fred. You think I would know?
Well, based on our experience 50 years ago, that's one area in which we have a great deal of detail from which we can extrapolate. And so I think we've got some pretty firm numbers on that now, don't we, Fred?
Short answer is we have a high degree of confidence in the numbers that we have in the budget right now. That said, public safety budget, yes, thank you. That said, the plan or the plans are not complete. And until the planning process is complete, I can't declare those numbers to be final. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that fuzzy math enough for you?
No, what I'm thinking is that if you were to go to the town, or maybe there's ARPA money available, if you need more money from the town, right? The only, and I'm speaking for myself, not the board, the only place that I would feel that that's justified to ask to get more from the town would be for public safety. So that's why, and as Gary pointed out, the clock is ticking. So I think we need a very firm idea on what we need, because, again, that is something I think the town has a responsibility to provide. As far as the other things, as we mentioned, you've got a lot of discretion, and maybe some of the other items, if we find that public safety is too expensive or the town doesn't want to pay for it, you might have some discretion with those other line items. I've got a question about fundraising, though. Who has custody of those funds once you raise them? Who has custody?
That question has been raised in a couple of brief conversations with the Finance Committee. The town manager would be collecting the funds. The 501c3 corporation is a tax-deductible event that we just finished, and the money would come in through that, but the town manager would be handling the funds.
Good,
On any kind of payments, it would not be handled by the Finance Committee of the Concord 250.
Good, that's what I wanted
It
to hear.
comes through me, I approve things, but then it goes to the town manager's office.
Great, good. That's what I wanted to hear. And one more thing, I heard you say loud and clear that you need, this is a regional effort.
That's right.
And you need to coordinate with the regions. And you have an intermunicipal agreement in front of you, and it's unfortunate that this agenda didn't have that on it as an item that we can vote on tonight. But I would like to make a motion.
Yeah, why not?
Because it's as an update and it wasn't listed as an action. It wasn't listed on the agenda as something that we would discuss and vote. It was simply listed as an update. So I would like to make a motion that we put this on the December 18th agenda for the Select Board to discuss and vote on the intermunicipal agreement.
Second.
Mr. Howell, any discussion on that?
Well, the motion is that we put it on the agenda for our next
December
meeting.
18th.
Right.
I don't think a motion is necessary. It
But
will be there.
I made one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Howell?
Yeah, in terms of discussion, I read the intermunicipal agreement. I'm comfortable with it. It's been in the packet.
Yeah.
It seems to me that as the lead community, we have a responsibility to approve that. I'm mystified that we weren't the first community to approve
Yeah.
that, and the only reason I can come up with for that is that this is the first time that the agreement's actually been presented to us, and I'm concerned about how that came to be. But for my money, I would actually rather go ahead and propose that we approve this agreement. I think that
Tonight.
It's been duly noticed, it's been published. It's non-controversial. I'm familiar with intermunicipal agreements from my previous work, and there's nothing unusual about this one.
You know what, I agree. I'd rather vote tonight.
I think Carrie has something to say.
I was just going to say, if you're going to do that, I would recommend that on the 18th, you schedule a ratification of the vote you're taking tonight in case there's any question about
Okay.
the legality of the vote.
I do have one question about it. I'm sure it's in here, but I didn't print the right page. How much does each town contribute?
50,000.
50,000. And so are those funds, where are they in the budget?
Communications line, so 50,
50 of the 75? Okay, thank
Correct.
you.
So it's out of the money that you already have?
That's correct.
Yep.
Up to the chair.
It's the $50,000, Chairman, no.
I think we know where they're coming from, so.
No,
is there-
no, I was just going to say, the $50,000 actually saves the town money, because we had to do all this on our own. It cost us a great deal more, so by collaborating, we're actually saving money, which is terrific.
So I withdraw my motion, and I'd like to make a new motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or does somebody else want to make a new motion? I'll make a motion. Move to ratify the intermunicipal agreement. No, move to
I
approve.
think what you want to do is approve it tonight, and I'm just suggesting that there's an action to ratify it at the next meeting.
Move to approve the intermunicipal agreement for $50,000 and move to ratify that agreement at our December 18th Select Board meeting. Is that, do you think?
Why don't we just move to approve it, and then we will, because this is an enforceable agreement with other towns, and so that it is something that needs to be, properly adopted because it is a municipal agreement. So if you want to adopt it tonight, I think you don't want to prejudice the subsequent ratification by dictating that we will then ratify it in the future. We can adopt it tonight,
But I thought,
and then
Carrie had a different.
No, she's just saying, we're just going to vote it tonight. Then when we do the agenda for next time, we're going to put it on to ratify. But that's not part of this motion.
Because then, in fact, we are, in effect, ratifying it and adopting it at the same time.
Right, you're not voting to ratify it. You could, as part of the motion, include that you're going to schedule.
That's right, that's what I'm trying to say.
Schedule.
Can somebody say this better, because I'm stumbling on.
All right, move to adopt the intermunicipal agreement and schedule ratification for our next meeting.
Second. Mr. Howell?
Aye.
Myself, Mary Hartman, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So, do we have any further comments or questions from the board?
I have, go ahead.
Well, I'm looking at the preliminary budget plan version 3 that's in our packet, and noting that there is a comment on public safety suggesting $500,000 of additional funding needed, recognizing what Mary was pointing out, which is that the $700,000 that was previously allocated has been divided across all areas, with only $250 of that being allocated to public safety.
Right.
And the suggestion being that there should be a warrant article, or to be proposed as a warrant article for 2024. And so I just wanted to raise the question of, is that a warrant article that the select board would be sponsoring, and should we be holding at least a placeholder for that, recognizing that the numbers may change and fundraising hopefully will come forward, but it does seem to me that we need to at least contemplate that placeholder.
Well, that's something, as long as our next meeting,
That's right.
we're going to be collecting the
Yeah.
items that members of the board want to have the select board sponsor or allocate to other boards at that meeting. Let's
right.
do it then.
Right, and you need a source.
As far
Okay,
as-
but let me just ask, what is the preference of the 250th committee? Do you want the select board to sponsor it, or do you want to sponsor it?
I would, speaking for myself, but I think I can speak for the
Speak for the
committee.
committee on this
Speak
one.
for the committee. I would like to have the select board sponsor this.
Yeah.
So,
And we're having conversations with the finance committee, because they appropriately have a number of very good questions that they've asked us to respond to by next Monday. We're in the process of putting that together. So that would be obviously information we would share with the select board as well.
one other thing to mention is that I continue to be working with our legislative representatives on obtaining funds from the Tourism Committee of the legislature. And the request there, Fred and I went to their hearing about 6 weeks ago, and appeared in person. Well, Fred and I actually went.
In person, okay.
Yes, and the request we made was for funding for public safety, because the message we gave them was that as affluent a town as Concord may seem to be to others, it is the burden of the millions of dollars that are necessary to provide a safe and meaningful environment for a number of people that we are we cannot actually predict how many people will show up, is more than you could expect any town, at least of our size, no matter how affluent, to be able to bear from our own tax revenues. I think that received a favorable, got a favorable reception, but you never know what the legislature is going to do. And more importantly, you never know when they're going to do it.
Right.
And the message we gave them is that if the money comes through at the last minute, it's not going to do any good, because we have to plan things that we're going to have to pay for. And you can't plan those things if you're not going to be able to pay for them. And you can't just hold your breath and hope. So
Agreed.
So that's where we're going on it. And as far as the budget goes, obviously there's a lot of funding that needs to come in to support this event. And we have no certainty of where it's coming from.
Right.
It's going to be it's going to be an important presentation that whether the select board or the 2025 committee is the sponsor of this warrant article, there's going to need to be a very detailed and specific presentation that is made to the FinCom to justify this expense. We went to them last year, and based on that response, we decided not to go to the town meeting on this. Now we are a year closer. The need is better defined, and we have a better case for it, but we still are competing with other demands that are before the town meeting. So, yes,
Right. I want to agree with that, and I want to thank the whole committee and subcommittees. I think we're in a much stronger position than we were a year ago. I'm very heartened to hear all the different fundraising ideas and calendar events. But I agree, to go to town meeting, really, when you talk about grants, this is a great start with the Concord Museum. You know, you need some more detail on some other ones, you know, et cetera. CPC, Garden Club, commemorative coins. These are great ideas. I'm sure you know how to make good presentation on all of those. And I also wanted to ask about the website. When you talk about the website, are you talking about the Concord 2025 page of the town website?
Well, there's two places. The
right.
easiest public-facing one is just concord250.org. That's the one that's on the QR code on your packet. Just concord250.org.
Okay.
You'll find, like, for members of the public who want to find, hey, what are the calendar of events from now till 2026? That's where you go.
Okay, so I was looking for that, and I didn't know there was a concord250.org. Okay, so that needs to be widely publicized.
well, that essentially is not a website. It just is redirected to a page on the Visit Concord website.
It's just type in 250.org
Okay,
or use a
well,
QR
I
code.
didn't, I went on the Town of Concord
Yeah.
page,
Now, Town of
and
Concord-
that did
Town of
not
Concord's
have it.
different. Now, for
Right.
the town of Concord, as it all, you know, the 60 committees, right? We all
That's
have
right.
a website.
That's
For the
right.
Concord 225 committee, based on your suggestion, now Donna will take this
Right.
packet, clean it up, and put
Okay,
that so
good.
that public
Good.
can find it in more than one place.
All right.
But for just the random person who's like, what's going on? I want to find Concord250.org.
Okay, so that's why I'm bringing this up, because there's a lot of confusion with that.
And this nice board will be at the
Great.
visitor center. It's got a QR code for our tech-savvy young people.
Right.
You just click it, and it shows up.
Okay, so a couple more quick comments about that.
You're a young person.
So that was one of the first things I did, was to capture the concord250.org URL.
Great.
But I think an important thing to do is to look at the page on the town website
Right.
and bring that up to date.
Right.
It is,
Right, so we've been working on that.
needs to be brought up.
So a couple more quick questions. So the QR code, that's great for the young people. People like me, I don't always get my phone hooked up, or if I'm sitting way far away, if you also put the whole website, yep, great. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, everything, all right. And the other, yeah. And then the other thing I want to mention, I thought that the Ellen Garrison event was well publicized.
Yes.
And the George event, those were well publicized. The Veterans event, somehow I just missed it. So,
Well, it's on, you can see it on Minuteman, it's all recorded.
all right, yeah, but
And this
Anyway.
is this is one of the benefits of the intermunicipal agreement is as these events come up, not only in Concord
Right.
but at the National Park Service and Arlington and neighboring towns, it's going to go out. It's going to be super redundant.
Right,
So
exactly.
if you're in this area, you're going to get it.
Right, so there might be another website, a regional website even, or, you know. it's gonna-
And that's the thing. It's never a bad thing to have all this information posted to multiple places.
Exactly.
Many of us really like the Freedom's Way website. We go to that for a lot of our regional things. It's all going to be there.
Okay.
Right. It's going to be if you're in Arlington and you pick up a publication there, it's likely going to also talk about events here in Concord
Right.
and Lincoln, and so it would be tough to be in this area over the next 18 months and not know what's going on.
So far, I would say the people on the street do not yet know what's
Yes.
going on.
So
Right.
there's one comment I would like to make, which I think is existential as to this project, and I want to go back to the charge from this board to the committee, which says this event was to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Concord and other historical events related to the founding of our country. And that is repeated again in that same paragraph. And while you see on the National Park website several pages of events that are specifically related to the events that took place at the bridge and in the town of Concord before, during, and shortly after April 19th of 75. And you see the very comprehensive calendar that Beth Van Duzer put together, recounting with narratives, short narratives of each one of the related events. And then you look also at the research that was done largely by her, but also by members of the History and Education Committee, where they found the names of some 500 participants in the Revolutionary War, and some at least 50 or so ones that had a connection to the town of Concord. When you look at the events that are planned by the committee, you see hardly one that in any way makes reference to or promotes or recognizes those events. And I think that it is important that we not get distracted by some of the peripheral issues that we think are important to include. There's no question that some of the other issues, such as inclusion, people who were formerly not recognized in the past, the effect on the environment, and so on, all those things, there was no question that there should be inclusion, but it's a matter of emphasis. And I think those are things that deserve to be recognized and celebrated, but they should not be events and things that dominate something that is specifically designed and intended to celebrate a specific event in the history of our country, and this town and the world, and the events that made our town known worldwide as the basis or the place where democratic government that has survived and has provided the opportunity for all of these other all these other opportunities that would not have occurred if it had not been for that shot, literally speaking, that was fired on that day, and if it was not for Isaac Davis, who died at that place, and what was going on in this town at that time, it's important that those not only not be forgotten, but they should be the heart of the celebration rather than the tail of the dog. That's the view that I take. I'm not speaking for the board, but I am, in a way, speaking for somebody who has been very intimately involved with the establishing of this committee and the progress that has been made to date, and I hope that my concerns are taken to heart.
Certainly. And I'll speak not as a representative of the executive committee, but just personally, and I think, Henry, you and I can agree on this, and I'll say, to contextualize it, I want to thank you for all the work you've done in forming this committee and for the work that you got us to so that we can present here and have all of this stuff ready to go and prepared. That only happens if you are able to help get us to this point. So that's one. Two, we're proud Concordians, and we recognize the centrality of that history that you noted. And we also recognize, and I don't think this is recognized in previous iterations of this celebration, is that shot doesn't occur in a vacuum, right? And that it's not this shot versus narratives and other stories and other perspectives, but rather it happens in concert with, because of, and for all these other things that we are highlighting for the first time in Concord's history, right? I think to the extent that we are looking backwards and celebrating the events of April 19th, 1775, this is an awesome moment for the town of Concord to look forward, use those events to springboard the fact that we are in many ways the birthplace of democracy of this country, right? For a lot of voices that hitherto have not been given any airtime. And so I agree with you, and we are not trying to water down that narrative, but rather to expand that narrative. And I wish that had been done in previous celebrations, but we have this opportunity now. And we're sharing that opportunity with other towns and visitors and residents. And we also know that the folks that are coming to Concord in 2025 will look incredibly different than those that came in 75 and then celebrations before. And as much as this is a celebration for our town, it's a celebration for those visitors who can see themselves in the events that we're hosting for this town. And so we are aligned in that. And I think you and many others will be proud of the events that take place for how well it showcases the work that we do here in Concord.
It's just, I think, a matter of emphasis and proportion, which is very important.
I think you'll be very excited about that when we get to it. We're aligned on that.
Thank you.
You also have a public comment?
Do we have a public, yes?
Elizabeth Cobbs.
Yes. Can we turn her on?
Elizabeth Cobbs, are you?
Liz
do you have a
Cobbs.
comment?
Liz.
You have a comment?
Maybe.
Liz Cobbs, do you have a comment?
You're muted.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Barely.
Barely? Is it?
There you go.
Sorry about that.
Better.
Is that better? Okay, sorry about that. I just wanted to also weigh in on the celebration. I think this is such an exciting opportunity for the town and for all of us to participate, not only in, as Mr. Dane, as you've noted, to celebrate the past, but also, as we've discussed throughout the last hour, where the town is headed in the future. And that expansion and really understanding how that legacy continues to support the growth and the vibrancy of Concord, I think is very important to get both of those in balance. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else? I think that have we concluded our business?
I think we want to remind people that we have many vacancies on many boards. Remember, we were going to just remind people that if they look at our agenda, if anybody wants to volunteer.
Well, let's talk about that.
Okay, we'll talk about that
later.
later.
Let's talk about that.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
And myself, Mary Hartman, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Thank you again to the board.
Thank you very much.
Time.
Thank you.
Say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.